The sun enters each heavenly sign or house of the zodiac in what is called the 30th degree and leaves at the 33rd degree. Thus, God's Son is said by the ancients to begin his ministry at 30 and dies at 33. According to Plato, the highest form of magic consisted in the divine worship of the gods, plural, and according to Iamblichus, the priests, through sacerdotal theurgy, were able to ascend from a material state of unconsciousness to a realization of the universal essence, thus coming to an understanding of universal purpose by which the performance of high feats of magic became possible. Listen to this carefully, folks. This is their own words. The underworld is not the sphere of the dead alone. It is the world of the mysteries. Wisdom is not easily cheated. And if you don't wake up, I would rather be dead than live in slavery in the New World Order. Blood will run in the New World Order. Ignorance, superstition, and fear, what they call the destroyers of all good things. Hiram of Biff was really, folks, Jacques Millet of the Knights Templar. How about that? I could go on and on and on and on. I will go on and on and on and on until you either wake up or I am dead, one or the other. Were born to be fleeced and have the wool pulled over their eyes and are eventually always led to the slaughter. Should I go on? I will. How do you feel, sheeple? Why do you do these things? Because somebody tells you to.
Yeah. So my computer started like freezing up a little bit at the beginning, and it wouldn't let me cue the music up or anything. So we're off to a weird start. I heard that reading about this stuff does weird stuff, right? So it makes other things happen. But welcome back. This is going to be for my series, Dopamine Deep Dives. I think it's on, we're streaming, what do they call it? Simulcasting. Is that how you say it? On your channel and my channel. So make sure to check out Mario's YouTube channel. Comment, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. And yeah, Mario, you want to plug anything else before we get started in this hot and heavy topic, man?
Yeah, people can check out symbolicstudies.com, right? And they can find all my links through there, basically. So that's one of my main hubs. This is going to be a fun conversation, man. There's lots to get into here. And, it's kind of like a continuation of a stream we did last year, back in March, actually, with H.P. Lovecraft. And so I almost feel like this is almost like a part 2 or something.
Kind of, sort of. And that's what draws me to Grant. Now, everyone knows how I feel about Crowley and that whole dilemma. And Grant was a devout Crowleyite or Crowleyan, however you want to say it. So, I mean, he was just as degenerate, if not as much as Crowley, right? And what draws me to him, though, is this Lovecraftian Cthulhu mythos aspect of it all, because I am an H.P. Lovecraft fan. And how you said we've done the episodes. We did a couple episodes, actually, right? We did one on Parsons, and we did one on H.P. Lovecraft, I think it was. And I think we did one more on top of that. So
Okay.
for those that haven't checked it out, check those out. Those are awesome. I think those were over a year ago now, right? Close to... Yeah, that was a while back. But here we are, and that's what's drawn me to Grant. Now, we're going to get into it, the whole chaos magic aspect of it all. But what did you think, Mario, when you and I had talked to pick a subject, because that's usually how it goes. We'll throw things around and be like, hey, you want to talk about this? Well, you want to talk about that? I go, well, I've been wanting to get into Grant. And then you were like, well, let's talk about the tunnels of Set.
Right.
And I don't think I was prepared for what I encountered. What'd you think about it, man?
Oh my gosh, dude. Well, I'll just say that on a synchronistic level, all this information has come to me at the right time. And I've known that I've wanted to dive into Grant, specifically his work on the tunnels of Set. And the main reason why is because, I'm a huge nerd for all things Northern. And so I've been saying for a while, we come from and return to the North. This is what I'm picking up symbolically. There is a tradition here, right, which is sometimes known as the stellar tradition or the stellar current. And I was already aware ahead of time that Grant basically incorporated, and he's not the first one, but that there were occultists incorporating northern sky symbolism, northern sky mythology, and kind of encoding a lot of what's happening up there with the various constellations, Ursa Major, Minor, some of the important stars, right? The main important star being the pole star. I knew that was going to be mentioned in his work about all of this. So when you proposed Grant, I'm like, dude, let's get into the tunnels of Set. And I'll just say on my end, it absolutely delivered. It blew my mind multiple times. I have so many highlights. I have so many notes. There are so many different things to kind of talk about. And it's kind of the perfect material to read after, some of the research that we've done with Lovecraft and things like that. So it filled in a lot of gaps. Absolutely.
I do want to get a little bit unorthodox with it. Now, we're obviously not going to be covering 100% of everything because there's just so much to cover. And on top of that, I want to preface as well with, we're not going to get into the darker aspects of it. And for those that want to check it out or hit me up off air, I'll let you know what the darker aspects of it. We might kind of brush upon what they're insinuating if you catch my drift, Mario, but it is very sexual. There is a lot of, because that's what they were all about, sex magic. So it is very sexual, and then there's some other more degenerate stuff. If you anything that you could possibly think of that's the darkest aspect of whatever life, this is what it involves. And this is coming from the homunculus guy, right? The guy that reads about creating homunculus through the use of various animals and things like that. So it's not my first rodeo, but I didn't know what this was. And I just did the episode with Occultist Lux on the Tree of Life. And it just so happens to be this is on the Tree of Death, right? Which, again, it's the inversion of that. And so I just want to say that. And I'm also not an occultist. So if you have your own interpretation, you're listening to this back again. I've never worked with this. I don't intend to work with this. But do you do anything, Mario? I know you do tarot readings and stuff like that. Do you use any magical systems? And if you want to answer that, you don't have to, but have I asked you this before?
I'm in the same boat, man. I'm an observer. I'm a researcher. I do tarot readings. That's one of my things. And I observe the tarot as a system that makes a lot of sense when you're looking at it. Holistically, I think there's a lot of people who can use it and do use it in really maybe not productive ways. But I'm right there with you, man. There is something to be said about engaging in this material when you're literally trying to conjure up or evoke or communicate with these old ones and stuff. So we were talking off air, but it's not uncommon for people, I think, who are naive and they dip their toes into this world and they start doing some of these rituals and whatnot it's not uncommon for them to go crazy or to kind of fry themselves or whatever. It's really, really serious, deep stuff. I'm more so interested in the symbolism, and I'm more interested in the mythology that kind of backs up the symbolism. So that's where my head is at.
And the reason I like tackling these subjects in a group setting, right, or like a think tank type of thing, is because we both look at the same material and extract different things from that same material. So we
Yeah.
bring forth two different points of views from the same stuff. Whatever you see, I don't see, and vice versa. Now, like I said, I'm gonna get a little bit unorthodox with it towards the end or whenever it presents itself, because how you're saying this filled in a lot of holes for me, I guess, right? And I'm like thinking about extracurricular things as I'm reading all this, and I'm kind of doing like, you know how you always do research on a side sort of thing while you're doing a main research? Well, this is kind of like adding to that mind palace of just garbage at this point, I guess. But I want to start off with a little bit of Kenneth Grant, who he was, and then I know you are familiar with the Typhonian OTO, which you told me that you kind of cut your teeth on that at first. So I'd want to get your input on that. So Kenneth Grant, for those that don't know, he was born May 23rd, 1924. And I actually thought about pushing this show back to the 23rd. But
interesting.
I have another episode on the 23rd, so I was like, I was going to mess everything up. And I know we had already set it up. But he was born May 23rd, 1924. He died January 15th of 2011. He was an English ceremonial magician and advocate of the Thelemic religion. He was a poet, novelist, writer, and then he ended up founding his own Thelemic organization, the Typhonian Order Templi Orientis, which he later named the Typhonian Order. Now, this is a guy who was an avid Crowleyite, a fan, so much so that he tried reaching out to him at first. He was kind of blocked off by this other guy because the guy said that he was mentally unstable, which I could believe it. And he eventually went on to become Crowley's personal assistant. And he got Crowley towards like the end of his life. So he got the heroin addicted, high-pitched voice. Hi, I'm Crowley, right? The great beast, 666. That Crowley, he was like, listen, I can't pay you. And for those that haven't Googled or YouTube Crowley's voice, that's what he sounds like. I'm not playing. He was like, hey, listen, I can't pay you, but I can show you magical stuff. So that's how it was. He worked for Crowley in exchange for access to his occult library and, I guess, magical knowledge. At that point, he initiated him, essentially, is what he did. And I mean, you can use your imagination for that. I mean, think about what Crowley would do to initiate somebody. Now, in 1949, he befriended occult artist Austin Osman Spar, which is, I'm not going to say one of my favorite occultists, but one of the more interesting occultists that I've studied and know about, the grandfather, the granddaddy of chaos magic. And chaos magic is a very interesting aspect of magic just because of it's scary because of its simplicity, and then it's genius enough because of the simplicity, right? But that's like a double-edged sword because if it's so simple, think about how the elites in the mainstream are able to influence you through the use of this chaos magic, this system that kind of, it just takes a shortcut, right? Takes a shortcut and leaves all the ceremonial BS and everything out of it, and it gets straight to the point. It's a very straightforward magical system, which is, again, and I during the research of this, the tree of death, right? The inversion, and I think I say it wrong, but I'm not even gonna try and say it, but I've heard that the elites use it in order to kind of sort of process your soul in a type of way by invoking the certain types of colors, the certain types of, again, the musical notes are also a part of this, invoking things in a certain musical tone, key, and they use these things in order to draw it in. And again, it's got to do with these vampires, these psychic vampires, which I've encountered. I don't know about you, Mara, but I've encountered psychic vampires. And when you go into, these streams with a lot of people, you jump in there and it kind of sort of just drains. And there's that one guy that's kind of shady, you know what I'm saying? So I feel like I've encountered this before. And this is part of that practice, becoming this psychic vampire, this vortex that kind of sort of is able to leech off of the energy of other people who are trapped in that tree, in those different dimensions, if you will. Now, he founded an ISIS, a London-based New ISIS Lodge, where he added many of Crowley's Thelemic teachings. And he was also, this is where it gets weird, and this is the part that I like, right? Bringing in extraterrestrial themes and influences from from the works of fantasy of H.P. Lovecraft. Now, why do they do this? And the reason that they do this is because in chaos magic, it's all about belief. It's all about what the practitioner believes. So if it's true to the practitioner, it's true, right? Everything is permitted. So what they'll do is they will invoke, or they will put these deities, even if it's from a false narrative, into the position for whatever ceremonial project that they're doing, right? Whatever magical project they're doing, they'll invoke them for that project. And then after the fact, they'll just chuck them to the wind, right? And so that can be anything. That can be the spaghetti monster. That can be Cthulhu, which we'll get into all that stuff, right? The Cthulhu mythos. And that's why it's so dangerous. Because I've always said, and I did that episode with Slick Dissident, where I said, in God we trust. Which God? Right? You don't know which God they were talking. We all assume automatically that it's the God that we all know and love, right? Jesus Christ. But to these people, I don't think so. Because of the fact that they're able to invoke these entities, whatever it is, as a husk almost, right? As a shell, invoke it in there, and then they do their magical practices and move on. So,
right.
Do you want to add some stuff?
Yeah, man. One of the things regarding the Lovecraftian mythos is that as we move through these cycles of time, through these aeons, right? The pantheon that different cultures are going to worship or revere, they change, right? And so we are living in a world now where a lot of people are considering the Lovecraftian mythos to be the current new pantheon. The way I've kind of been saying it is that it's a pantheon for modern sensibilities. And so they're finding correspondences with Lovecraft, his deities, and some of these older deities. Right. And so that's kind of the thing, is that a lot of people out there's a lot of material, there's whole communities and stuff where they're working with the Lovecraftian gods, because as Thomas Sheridan put it, I was listening to him recently talk about this. He's basically saying, the way he puts it is that the Lovecraftian mythos is the pagan religion of the West. It's the new pagan religion of the West. And that this is actually what is kind of coming about, which is really interesting too, because I read an article prepping for the show by Chris Knowles, and he's saying that it's very possible that Lovecraft got a lot of his ideas from the Theosophical Society. And so he pulls out certain works that they were putting out, and then certain passages that Lovecraft has written, and there is a lot of similarities there. And so that's kind of the thing, is that these other gods, the Egyptian pantheon, the Greek or Roman pantheon or whatever, at some point things need to be updated, for Western people. And so a lot of people consider this new pantheon to be it, pretty much. So it's a workable system, essentially. It's sound enough where you can actually, incorporate it into your workings and whatnot.
Yeah, again, and that's why I always talk about how magical systems are meant to be adapted. They're meant to be changed up. There's no solid way of creating your homunculus. I mean, there's various different grimoires, and yeah, but here's what has always baffled me as far as H.P. Lovecraft. Is it that these things, these entities, these forces exist outside of space and time and they're trying to get in? Or is it just because Grant, and again, this is the only book that I've read by him, so he's got numerous other writings, okay? And we're talking about Nightside of Eden for those that are just tuning in. And so I don't know where he stands with Lovecraft, but you can kind of sort of make the assumption that these things were sort of telepathically talking to him, or in his dream state. Because one of the things that we see a lot is, and I've heard it put before, that when you're dreaming, you enter a different dimension. You are in a different state of consciousness, essentially, and things are able to come through. Now, we know that Lovecraft, he was having night terrors, and a lot of his inspiration came from his dreams. So where do you stand on that, Mario? Do you think that there are these things that are trying to break through? Because that would solidify the idea that I have, that these things, materialize themselves through the use of writing, which we know H.P. Lovecraft was a very influential writer, very prolific. So he wrote a lot of things, sort of solidifying this mythos in existence by writing it down, right? Even if he was, because if you want to follow the mainstream narrative of his life, allegedly his grandfather, which he grew up with, had an occult library, and supposedly the Necronomicon that he had come up with was inspired through the Picatrix, which is a famous grimoire, one of the more famous ones. And so I don't know, where do you stand with that? Do you think that there are things, or is it like Crowley, these are aspects of our subconscious that are just deep down inside us, and we're able to tap into those energies and entities?
Right. I think it's both, pretty much. And this is what the whole mythology behind the Nightside of Eden is all about, and this inverse tree, this reversal. Because essentially what this whole entire thing is about this primordial chaotic mother, and that this primordial chaotic mother had a child, and according to a lot of the occultists that write about this material, they generally call her Typhon. Right. And so she is, but if you look at the traditional, interpretation of Typhon, it's masculine. But in their interpretation, it's feminine. And she goes by many other names as well. In a lot of ways, it kind of reminds me of the Sophia Demiurge story, is that there's this primordial mother. She did not have a counterpart. She was the first thing in existence. She represents totality in a lot of ways. So she represents the entire cosmos. And deep within her, she produced the first masculine counterpart. And in this tradition, it's Set. So Set and Typhon, you're talking about the mother and you're talking about the child, basically. But this is also a metaphor for the different universes that Grant likes to talk about. Sometimes he refers to it as Universe A and Universe B. So this is Universe A. This is the material world. This is the world of light, and then there's a Universe B where it's immaterial. It's more spiritual. It's more etheric. And that there are entities on the other side that you can communicate with, and you can receive information from them and do different types of workings with them and everything else. And so, is this just a metaphor for your psychology and going to the other side of, who you are? It's kind of the same thing. There's actually like little separation between these ideas, I think, because one of the things that Grant talks about and other people have talked about too is that there's an as above, so below relationship with our bodies and the earth and the cosmos. So the deviant sexual practices that you alluded to earlier, it's because you're doing unorthodox things, because you're doing darker things, because you're exploring different parts of yourself. Their belief was that now you can explore different parts of the universe if you do it the right way. If you know the right steps, if you know, what you're doing, pretty much.
Magical formula. Yeah.
Yeah, basically. So as you explore the deeper parts within, this allows you to explore some of the more hidden aspects of what's going on out there. But the big idea is that this reality, this domain, it's just the other side of the coin for this other place, And so I oftentimes look at it as, that's the underworld, or that's the spirit realm, if you want to call it that. It's gone by many, many, many names. And then we live here, which is a very different place. It's more physical, it's more material, all of that kind of stuff. But yet they are actually one and the same, because the metaphor really is that we're dealing with a tree that has roots. And so the traditional Kabbalistic tree of life, that would be the tree of light, or the dayside tree. And then the Klipothic tree, what we're talking about, the tunnels of Set, the different paths between this tree, that is the Nightside, basically. And so we're living on the dayside tree here, but then there's also roots to this tree, which is deeply, deeply feminine and related to chaos. And so Set basically is considered to be this chaos mother's sort of prodigy son, pretty much, the chosen son kind of thing, the first son, essentially. And there's a correspondence with him and so many things. It's kind of crazy, actually, all of the different correspondences between, constellations and gods and myths and all of that kind of stuff. But this mother is oftentimes related to Ursa Major and the North Star, and as is Set. In fact, Set is said to be behind Ursa Major, hiding behind Ursa Major. But he's also associated with Sirius, and that Sirius according to this line of thinking, is actually a child of Ursa Major, who's this great mother in the sky. And so Sirius is considered to be a sun, the star of Set. So that's just a little background on some of that stuff. But yeah, there you go. There's the Tree of Life.
Oh, this is the cliff. How do you say it? I always say it wrong. Cliff off. Clip off. All right.
Yeah,
I just want to make sure I say it right.
Yeah.
Clipothic. All right.
Mm-hmm.
Just make sure.
Yeah.
I'd rather not say it at all than say it and say it
I
wrong.
hear you, dude. Yeah. I
So this is it's pretty much an inversion, right, of the Tree of Life. Now, it's the way I've heard it put is various different ways. I've heard that it's the shadow realm, if you will, right? Yu-Gi-Oh, the shadow realm of the Tree of Life. It's the inversion, so it's the tree of the destruction, death, and demonic entities. And also, I've heard it put that when there was a story of destruction where they destroyed the Tree of Life, and then the pieces that came from that are what came together to form this other inverted tree, right? And it was like kind of sort of like the Lucifer story where these other entities were the ones that were casted out, and those are the ones that inhabit this other tree, right? The outcasts, the demons, daemons, whatever you want to refer to them as, they're the ones that inhabit this tree. Now, before he jumped on, bro, I had an idea because I put this esoteric Eddie hat on, and I said, because this has to do with the tarot. Well, what if the hermit has the lantern to illuminate his way through the tunnels of Set? Right?
Oh, sure. Oh, dude,
right?
That is a great metaphor. 100%.
He's going through the tunnels of Set. Because again, we have to pay attention to the symbolism, and there's various ways of interpreting things, but the way I heard this put is this is the true meaning behind the tarot. And I know you and I have talked about the tarot before being some sort of ascension technology, a code that you need to decipher in order to ascend to that next dimension or level of existence, if you will. Now, let me finish up real quick on Grant before we get too sidetracked. Because again, there's so much to talk about. I know we're not going to get to everything today, and I'm sure Slick Dissident's going to be in the chat just going crazy, wanting to do a follow-up episode on this, right? Because that's how it always works. So we have here Grant later on. So he brought in H.P. Lovecraft's work, and he became interested in Hindu Tantra, incorporating ideas from it into the Thelemic practices of sex magic. Now, I heard that H.P. Lovecraft's wife, the only wife he ever had, introduced him to these tantric positions and this sort of magic. And there's also a conspiracy that she was also an associate of Crowley. Now, I don't think there's any solid evidence, but I just want to put that out there. That is a conspiracy that she was a friend of Crowley's. And again, insinuating, not that they ever met, but insinuating that there was some sort of connection there. And that's how Crowley was in touch with Cthulhu, right? If you read Lavenda and Cthulhu, he might have understood it wrong, and it could have been actually Cthulhu that he heard, right? Again, who knows? But we have here Grant's writings and teachings have proved a significant influence over the other currents of occultism, including chaos magic, the Temple of Set, and the Dragon Rogue or Rouge, I guess however you want to say it. They also attracted academic interest at the study of Western esotericism. Now, like I said, he had reached out to Crowley or tried to get a hold of him, never did. Eventually, they started corresponding together via letters, and he became his secretary and his personal assistant. He was unable to pay him, so he paid him in magical instruction, of course. And Crowley saw Grant as a potential leader of the OTO in the UK, writing in his diary, "Value of Grant, if I die or go to the USA, there must be a trained man to take care of the English OTO." Now, Crowley, I guess, would verbally abuse him at some point in time. He called him, "You are the most consummate bore that the world has yet known," and this at 20. Eventually, Grant's family disliked that he was working for zero pay and pressured him to resign, which he did in 1945. And we know that Crowley died in 1947. And when he died, Grant took his position as the head of the OTO. Let me make sure I'm getting that right. Let's see here. Grant attended Crowley's funeral at Britain Crematorium while accompanied by his new wife. Now, his wife was also involved with him in his magical practices as well. So and his wife was actually the one that introduced him to Austin Osman Spar, which we could do a whole episode on that guy. That guy was on another level. And again, this aspect of chaos magic, it's organization beyond your comprehension. So people think, oh, chaos, it's very chaotic. No. It's an organization, a level of organization beyond your comprehension. You can't even conceive and comprehend how organized it is, right? And we've always heard, what is it? Order out of chaos. Is that what they say?
Yeah. Order out of chaos.
Yeah,
that completely relates to everything that I'm talking about. So Typhon and Set, chaos would be the mother, the order would be Set, which relates to pillar symbolism, and Grant even references the pillar in relation to Set as well, and that all standing pillars are related to Set and things like that. And I've done presentations on the meaning behind the pillar and how it brings order and stability to a chaotic universe, basically. But real quick, last thing on Steffi Grant, she's also the artist behind.
Yes.
Right, some of the covers there. I don't know if you mentioned that, but I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, she did a lot of art for him, actually. She was, again, sort of like a visionary artist. If you look at her art, it's very dark, very sexual. Yeah. So again, I mean, what can you expect? We have Grant. He co-edited a lot of different publications of Crowley after the fact. We have Moonchild, Diary of a Drug Fiend, Magic with a K, and then it was the other one. What was it? The Confessions of Aleister Crowley, which I had, because reading this book, he references a lot of other things, right? He references almost like if you're supposed to know, hey, as we've talked about before, you ever have I don't know how old you are, Mario, but you ever had that teacher when you're in school? It's like, well, you should have learned in the last grade about how to do this, so I'm going to teach you how to further on. It's like you don't remember what you learned in the grade before that. Yeah. So this is what it felt like reading Grant. It was like he references other works, especially of Crowley, almost like it's like a Bible to him, essentially, right? He always references the Book of the Law. He references how these things were of extraterrestrial intervention, if you will, right? Divine intervention. To them, it was divine. So I kind of flipped through the Confessions of Aleister Crowley, which is an inversion, really, because it's usually the Confessions of St. Augustine or some sort of right Christian or religious figure, and of course the Confessions of Aleister Crowley. And he eventually got kicked out of the OTO and formed his own. And the reason that he did that was because the guy who was there didn't like the fact that he was bringing in H.P. Lovecraft's mythos, right? This Cthulhu mythos. He didn't appreciate that, but again, he started his own thing. And let's see here. One of the things, this quote that I found on the Wikipedia that stood out to me: the works of Kenneth Grant are fashioned out of the stuff of dreams. The neat and orderly appearance of the shelves of the Typhonian trilogies give no hint of the eldritch worlds they contain. One opens each volume with a sense of wonder, and one finishes them with the material for nightmares and visions of worlds yet unborn. That was Martin P. Starr in 2003, and I believe him. Now, I'll be honest, a lot of the stuff went above my head. The reason for that being is because, again, I'm not an occultist. I'm not interested in messing with any of this stuff. I'm interested in learning about it. I find it super interesting. But from what I've heard, it doesn't end well for anybody who is dabbling in this Universe B. Now, think of Universe B, how they show us on Netflix, on the Stranger Things show, where they're able to, again, go in through this portal to the other side, this world that is a replica of, it's a shell of the world that they live in, but it's inverted. And within that world exist monstrosities, chimeras, etc., you name it. Essentially, I believe, Mario, that they take inspiration for shows like that and those concepts from the teachings of occultists like this, right?
Sure.
So,
oh yeah, definitely.
In 1977, Grant began the second Typhonian trilogy with the Nightside of Eden, in which he discussed some of his own personal magical ideas, outlining magical formulae with which to explore a dark, dense realm that he variously called Universe B and the Tunnels of Set. Conceived as a dark side of the Kabbalistic tree of life, Grant made connections between this realm and the extra mundane deities of H.P. Lovecraft's horror fiction. And this is, again, we're going to start cranking down here and talk about the Tunnels of Set. Now, let's see here. He brings in ufology, Lovecraftian gnosis, Some people describe his work as verbal and conceptual labyrinths. Because again, you said that you like the way that he wrote, very wordy, word salad. What'd you like about it that you told me?
I just love the fact that it was dense with information and that he was really getting to the point, pretty much. Grant? Yeah, that there is just like if you're interested in this material and in the symbolism, he's just dropping like nuggets of information like the whole entire time. And I don't think that he really he's not trying to be cute with, his wording and stuff like that. So he's getting right to the point. And so for me, I it was a pleasure to read, actually. If anything, I just felt like every few pages I was getting so much information. I just needed time to like digest what was going on.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, we had scheduled this show for earlier on, and I was like, I know I'm not gonna. I didn't know what I was gonna get into, but I mean, here we are, and I'm sure there's gonna be follow-up shows.
Yeah.
So the Typhonian Order, and this is where you can enlighten me because I don't know a lot about them. The Typhonian OTO, self-initiatory magic organization based in the UK that focuses on the magical and Typhonian concepts, and it was originally led by Grant and his partner Steffi Grant. And is now, I don't know how true this is, Michael Staley. I don't know if that's still current or not. But again, it was based on the Thelemic magical practices. And Avid Crowleyan and the Typhon is the monstrous serpent, the giant serpent in Greek mythology. Right? He's the offspring, or they, them. Is it male or female?
Well, that's the thing. Traditional sources say male, but under this tradition, it's female. It's feminine.
Interesting. And I found it, and I also found it interesting that it was the offspring of Kronos, Saturn. Right. Some people attribute that to Satan. Some people have said I'm wrong on that. So I don't know where you are with that. If Saturn and Kronos are the same as Satan, this archetype.
I tend to see more similarities than differences with all this stuff. So I'm the type of person where I think that there's a lot of correspondences out there that maybe might rub people the wrong way if you're, really particular, about your mythology and things like that. But the Typhonian Order, basically, this is a long, deep narrative that has existed for, man, I don't know how long, but a very, very, very long time, of a great mother, of this great primordial goddess that is space, basically. And she relates to the abyss, she relates to chaos, she relates to spirit, she relates to heavily the number 5 and the 5-pointed star. This is something that Grant talks about, and some of the other material that I'm reading about this, they talk about it. But it's called the Typhonian tradition, but it's gone by other names throughout history. So just real quick, the Typhonian tradition, if you talk to practitioners of this stuff, they will use some of these words interchangeably, but maybe someone who's new to it, they might be confused, like, wait a second, is the Typhonian tradition the same as the Lovecraftian tradition? Well, it kind of is now, basically. It's acknowledging the oldest gods. And so there's this whole entire idea that a lot of the gods that people acknowledge now, like the planetary gods, Mars, even Saturn, Venus, etc., that the sun, that these planets are actually new, and that there are older deities out there. And this is what Lovecraft was tapping into. These really, really old entities. These ancient ones are the old ones. And so you can't get older, according to this material, than the great mother goddess, who is sometimes referred to as Babylon or Nuit. Nuit, Typhon, Nuit, like in French, Nuit means night, basically. And then Nu as well is also related to this whole entire thing. But they consider Set and this great mother to be the oldest deities out there. So why are you spending your time kind of working with all of these newer gods when you can just go right to the source of everything? And so the Typhonian tradition is part of this long lineage of different cults and groups that basically believe the same thing. And so there's the Typhonian tradition, the Lovecraftian tradition. Sometimes people call it the cult of Cthulhu. It's also known as the Clipothic current, right? It's the Setian tradition as well, or the cult of the beast. It's also the stellar mythos. So this is the idea that, instead of acknowledging, it's not that they're not there, obviously, but instead of worshiping the sun, right? Let's worship, there's older entities out there. There's older luminaries out there. And the oldest luminaries, according to a lot of groups, are the northern stars, and most especially the pole star. And these stars have been looked at as the imperishable or eternal stars because they're in the same place night after night after night. You look to the north, the pole star is always there. So this great mother goddess has been associated with the 7 stars of Ursa Major, which is in the northern sky, which is circumpolar, meaning that it revolves closely around the pole in the northern sky, but it doesn't dip below the horizon for most people in the world. Like 90% of the world can see Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. And so they're considered to be very, very old, very, very ancient. And since they're reliably always generally in the same place, they've taken on this meaning of just being eternal and just incredibly ancient. And so this is what the stellar mythos is referring to, the stellar current. A lot of times it's referring to the northern sky, which, by the way, you can use the northern sky as its own sky clock. So right now, most people focus on astrology. Astrology is based on the ecliptic, which is the path of the sun. But there are groups, especially a lot of northern groups, where they looked at the northern sky and they were closely monitoring the movement of Ursa Major around the pole star. And so they considered certain positions of Ursa Major to be, you know, the most opportune time to actually use the northern gateway, which is related to the stairway to heaven or Jacob's ladder, which Grant basically literally says that this stairway is related to Set, essentially. He says that. And even Set, by the way, is a reference to sept, S-E-P-T, as in septenary, as in the number 7. It's a reference to these 7 stars in the north. And so it's also been known as the Draconian current as well, or the Draconian tradition. Draco is right there in the northern sky. And then Grant also refers to the Ophidian mysteries, which is an African cult, essentially. But at the end of the day, all of this stuff really boils down to it's the cult of the mother. And in today's world, we do not acknowledge the feminine that way. You know, we are taught about a solar system. What this information is tapping into is the polar system, as in the pole star and the North Pole, and the relationship between those two things and this world axis or cosmic axis, which is essentially a bridge to the other side. And one of the more fascinating things about all of this is that Grant says that in order to access the Nightside of Eden, the Clipothic tree, the tree of death, you access it via that central Sephiroth called Doth, which is sometimes present in the Kabbalistic tree, sometimes it's not there, but it's always implied this central Sephiroth. You use Doth as the gateway to communicate with Universe B, and Doth is heavily related to the Garden of Eden and the North, which is something I've been talking about for a while. And I just think that it's amazing that all of my northern research fits in with this material. So for people like me, there's a lot of places where you're not going to find information regarding the northern sky and the various traditions, but you will see it in these circles. So it's because it's occult information. It's hidden information. It's really, really old information. And so it's a completely different system than what people exoterically, you know, are acknowledging, like the stars of astrology and you know, that whole tradition and stuff. It's a different system entirely, and it has to do with the northern sky.
Yeah, have you read forgot the name of the book. I think it's by Peter Levenda, the Ascension Technology one. You know which one I'm talking about, right?
Stairway to Heaven?
Stairway to Heaven. Have you read that book?
I have, yeah.
Yeah,
Totally.
that book's fascinating. Again, the different ascension technologies that are present in various cultures and religions, etc. And this particular system has what I interpreted as some influence from voodoo, right? This, again, with and even Grant says it's got roots in Africa. So yeah. This interpretation of bringing these deities down into oneself, and again, so I forgot what I was going to say. I was going to say something else. The aspect of chaos magic, again, is present in this as well. And I don't have the notes on the 7 stars, but I did see that come up here and there, and I was like, oh, look, that's something for for Mario to pick at, because I'm sure that it is relevant to your research. Because we all have our own thing, right? We all have our thing that we focus on. Your thing is the North Pole, right? Poles and holes. And then my thing is like the homunculus. So I'm gonna find here the definition of chaos magic that I like the most. I have it on my phone here. Let me pull it up. But this has always stuck with me because, again, if they're able to use it against you without having to really put much effort into it, then I mean, again, Austin Osman Spar is considered the father of chaos magic for his emphasis on the power of the subconscious mind and his system of sigils. Chaos magic is not about disorder, as the name might imply, but rather focuses on order that is beyond conscious understanding. And it combines elements of Eastern mysticism and Western ritual magic. The practitioner summons powers from deep within the subconscious rather than calling upon the power of outside agencies. Ritual is used to evoke images from the subconscious and to release magical power. And this is, again, what you see with all of these corporations. Essentially, they have sigils, which they operate. I know you design logos, Mario, so you're familiar with, again, that they might ask you to put something in there that's kind of weird. Like, why do you want to put that? It's just the way it's always been. It's because, again, it goes back to Jung and his archetypes, these symbols that speak on the much deeper level, and they speak to our subconscious. And I forgot where I heard it before, but it's like a large percentage of our decisions that we make they come from the subconscious. Again, that's something I heard. If it's real or not, again, I'm not.
No, that's it, dude. No, that is the way I look at it, right? Is the material world came after the realm of thoughts and ideas and concepts and symbols. The dream world preceded the material world. This is what we're talking about. And so when you're talking about the other side, universe B, you are talking about that primordial, spiritual, more etheric place, a place that is more chaotic. Chaos is basically another word for spirit, in my opinion. And so when you're talking about chaos and spirit symbolism, it relates way more to the mother and way more to the feminine than it does to the masculine. Masculine symbolism is more so related to order, and there's more of an outward sort of thing going on. Even just look at our sexual organs, And so the feminine, there's more of a mystery there with everything, basically. And so, I think that's actually the thing, is that the subconscious realm is the realm that this came from, pretty much. And so it's the etheric nature of things. That's where everything truly was born out of. Order out of chaos. That's the whole entire thing.
Now I remember what I was going to say, but Da'ath, that hidden Sephiroth, right? The occulted Sephiroth is ruled by Uranus. And I thought that was funny because, I mean, right, the Eye of Horus is... right, the anus. Grant actually talks about how it is the anus of I think of Horus, or one of the two, because I always get the two brothers mixed up, and then when he reincarnates as the little man child, or homunculus, I guess is what he would be considered, right? I always get those mixed up, but he talked about how, and then the power that rules over that hidden one is the Uranus. Now, that's why Grant refers to it as like this Sodomic formula, if you will, because it's the backside of the tree. Again, this perversion, and people always wonder. We always make fun of it, but right, they like to do the stuff in the butt. You know what I'm saying? And all this stuff, and again, because it's a perversion of what is meant to be mainstream, I guess. And I see Grant disagreed with Crowley on his Sodomic, or I forgot what he called it, his formula. They both had different interpretations as what you need to do, right? In these practices, which in some parts of the book, he gets into graphic detail as to what you need to do, right? In order to, there are magical formulas. Now, a lot of the stuff that went over my head was like the numerology and how he assigns different values to all these different deities. Now, that's why I tell people that Pythagoras, and he even mentions Pythagoras in here in the Music of the Spheres, where all is number. And I think that they do that in order to resonate on the different frequency when they assign these numeric values to these deities or whatever it is, right? We all know about 666 and all these different things, 33 and all these different numbers. Well, there are other numbers as well, right? 418, abrahadabra, and all these different things, which I believe that they still use that in mainstream with whatever it may be, whatever it is, right? I'm not too well versed in gematria or gematria, however you want to say it, but I do believe that it's a way of hacking this matrix, right, in order to bring forth another, and not in a theurgical way, but again, invoking another energy, right, to affect your matter and reality here. Now, if it's an actual change, who knows? Because I like the aspect of Narco Longo, the way he breaks it down. It's like magic is just convincing yourself of, right, hypnotizing yourself into a state of mind and putting yourself in that state of mind, right? And one of the Hermetic principles is all is mind. So that would make a lot of sense, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. One of the things that is really intriguing to me right now is the mention of the number 5 and the importance of the number 5. And so when we're talking about universe A and then universe B to the Egyptians, the underworld was known as the Duat. And the symbol that corresponds with the Duat is the 5-pointed star, basically. And so the 5-pointed star is blowing my mind right now because I read another book to prepare for this, which is called Rites of the Mummy by Jeffrey
Cheater,
Evans
bro. Cheater, dude.
Lavenda. And they're getting heavy into the number 5 and the symbolism of the number 5. Well, the number 5, as I mentioned earlier, or the 5-pointed star, is another symbol of this great mother goddess who sometimes I call her, or sometimes she's referred to as Babylon. And so this great mother corresponds with the number 5 for so many different reasons. But the number 5 really is this kind of intermediary number between the physical and metaphysical, between the material and immaterial. And so that's why we have 5 fingers, 5 main appendages, all of these different types of things. There's 5 elements, the 5th element being, spirit or ether itself.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. The 5th card of the major arcana is the Hierophant. The Hierophant is the Pope, and Pontiff Maximus means the bridge builder. And so he is the intermediary between the people and heaven, basically. And this bridge literally is basically a reference to the stairway to heaven concept as well. And so it's not uncommon to see the 2 cross keys underneath the Hierophant. These are keys to the gate to the other side, to universe B, to commune potentially with these entities or these gods or whatever, right? But the number 5 essentially is a bridge. It's a bridge between this reality and the reality next door, the other side or the great beyond, if you want to call it that. And so if you look at our mathematical system, if it's a base 10 system, the number 5 is right in the middle between 0 or 1 and 10. And so it literally is kind of this bridge between this lower and the higher. And the mathematics behind the number 5 are absolutely wild, especially the 5-pointed star, because it encodes the golden mean, the golden ratio, which gives us things like the golden spiral, right? The Fibonacci sequence, right? So this spiral of life. And so even the spiral in and of itself, it's also a bridge. It's a bridge between inner and outer, right? And so the mathematics behind the number 5 blow my mind. There's so many interesting correspondences with the number 5, including the fact that woman, the average menstrual cycle, the time of bleeding is 5 days, which is something else that he references in the book. And so the 5 is deeply feminine. When you
He was obsessed with that too, by the way, menstruating women.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Starfire, I believe, is what it's referred to. And so the blood of menstruation. Mm-hmm. And so women and their natural cycle, that was a timekeeping sort of tool, was knowing when a woman is actually going through her period. And the word period, he even mentions in the book too, it's a reference to a period of time. That's what it's a reference to. It's a reference to cycles, right? And so the number 5 relates to the divine feminine in so many different ways, and Venus and things like that. And it is also the number that the old ones or ancient ones from the Lovecraftian mythos, that's the number that they identified with. And so
Really?
to me, yeah. And so there's a whole big correspondence here with the number 5 and all of these things, that I'm talking about. But the kicker, really, the cherry on top, is the Lovecraftian connection. And he goes through, in other stuff that I'm reading right now, Lovecraft referring to the ancient ones having, I believe it's like a quintile. I don't know if that's how you say it for the number 5, but like a quintile, basically structure to all of the things that they built, and that was the number that they revered. So when you see a 5-pointed star, we almost take it for granted now, I would say. But when you see a 5-pointed star, it's tapping into all of this stuff. It's a very, very old, ancient symbol. And as I said, it's actually a symbol of the underworld. The Egyptians saw it that way.
From the book, the number 5 represents total manifestation. It is the glyph of woman par excellence. Her formula is 15, 3 times 5. The symbol of the goddess 15 has been treated at length in the trilogy. And he goes on. 5 is the number of feminine principle in its lunar phase. And he talks about Nuit and the 5-pointed star with the circle in the middle, and the circle is red.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so he does get into it, and there is a little bit of typhonian numerology associated with everything. I believe this is very Pythagorean. They're taking other ideas before them and just kind of sort of putting their own spin on it, right? So yeah, absolutely, 5 manifestation. I didn't know that about the great old ones. That's very interesting.
I know, dude. When I read that, I was like, whoa. All right, here we go.
And we have here, let's see, where do we start, man? Because there's a lot of stuff. I know we've been just firing off the hip, and I'm trying to flip through all my notes here that are not organized. You want me to bring up your presentation?
Yeah, let's go for it, dude. I was going to say, there's some things in there that I would love to talk about. So we don't have to hit everything in here, but maybe just cruise to slide number 4, which is going to be Terawet and the hippopotamus goddess, right, with this alligator on her back. And this is really interesting because this is one of the correspondences of Typhon, this great mother, was Terawet, and that she was a protector of children and childbirth, and she's a deeply feminine figure, and she has long sagging breasts. That's a feature of hers. And sometimes you will see this alligator on her back, and sometimes you won't see her. Sometimes you'll see her holding a knife. And if you notice, though, kind of on her headdress, there's 7 stars going down her back. This is actually a reference to Ursa Major. And so if we cruise through to the next one, you'll see just another example of her. And you'll see her 7 stars, alligator on her back. But notice that she actually has the thigh of a bull right next to her. So she's holding it with her left hand. And so the thigh of the bull is a reference to Ursa Major. It's fascinating. And so we will see basically the northern sky according to the Dandara zodiac. Yeah, dude, exactly. She is, for sure.
Dumb thick.
And so she's actually holding that thigh, but notice that it's corded to the bull right there, right? And so there's this interesting relationship with the northern sky and the bull, which is very, very appropriate for Taurus season because we live in a Taurus field. That's my opinion. We live in a big construct that's toroidal in nature. Why, of all things, is it called a Taurus field?
Shout out to Taurus gang. Gang.
And then also, it's fascinating too, just the fact that we have the Taurus field. There's so many words that come from Taurus too. The bullseye, right? A lot of words that start with TAR are actually references to the bull. But the thigh of the bull in the northern sky is sometimes referred to as the thigh of Set as well. And so she's connected to the bull, and she's connected to this leg and this thigh. But basically, a lot of underwater creatures, like the hippopotamus, like the alligator, like the serpent, a lot of these creatures relate back to this chaotic mother. The dragon as well. This is something you'll see if you start looking into Tiamat symbolism and what she's all about. But a lot of the darker animals that live underwater or at least can go underwater, have been related to this chaos mother, this dark, feminine, chaotic mother. And so if you go to the next slide.
And that's how we have which I have later on, but the frog, right?
Yes,
Is it
exactly.
Keck or something like that? The chaos and the trolling and all that stuff.
100%. So this is the Dendera Zodiac. And so this is what the night sky looked like in, I believe it's a later era of ancient Egypt. And so you see the constellations right in the middle of the disk. That is the northern sky, basically. And so you can see Terawet. She's there with a knife. And then you could see right across from her, down below, you can see this leg, which is the thigh of Set or the thigh of a bull. And if you want to go to the next slide, I actually have it zoomed in and it's rotated just so you can get a better view of it.
And everything. A question, Mario, is the thigh sort of representative of the phallus, or what are we?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah? Yep, it's representative of a few things, including the phallus, 100%, because when you're dealing with one-legged symbolism, this is actually a whole thread of information that actually, when I first read it, it was hard for me to wrap my head around the fact that this is the case. But now I've seen so many different examples in different myths of one-leggedness or one-footed storylines that I'm like, this is absolutely the thing. So the star Polaris in the northern sky is also known as the nail star or the sky nail, because it is fixed from the perspective of Earth, regardless of your cosmology. From the perspective of Earth, all of the stars revolve around Polaris. Polaris is fixed in the northern sky, and so it's actually the hub of an axle. So it's kind of like the axle of the heavens, basically. The hub of a wheel, excuse me. So it's almost like a cosmic axle. And so one-legged symbolism is a reference to the spinning of things around, one point or one tip. It's almost like a top or something like that. Or it's like the pin inside of a pinwheel. And so I can turn around on one leg. A ballerina can spin on one leg. That's the symbolism. It's not uncommon to see Mercury on one leg because he's heavily related to the cosmic or the world axis, this stairway to heaven, this bridge to the other side. Yep. And so one-leggedness is absolutely a reference to that, but the penis is also a reference to that as well. And as is our spine, actually. It's all related to the cosmic axis. That's how I see it personally.
Have I talked to you about my skull fuck method? Have I told you about that? I'm sure you've heard of it, right?
Dude, no, I'm intrigued, though.
You've never heard of the skull fuck method?
Well, I'm familiar with what skull fucking is, but I don't know what you're talking
about.
Well,
so again, we'll get to it in a little bit, but this idea of the thigh, that's also, Pythagoras had the golden thigh.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So this weird, right? Such a weird, and now my question is, are they a conspiracy? Because we know that pirates always had that peg, like the one leg. They always hopped. Is that like part of... Is that a nod at this sort of symbolism, or what's
potentially?
Going on?
No, I've heard people talk about that. Yes, potentially. I think that's a really, really intriguing idea. I had not considered it. I don't know where I heard that from. I wouldn't be surprised if it was on one of your shows or something like that. But somebody did bring that up, and I'm like, damn, there's something to that, possibly.
Or pirates were fake and gay. I mean, either one is good with me.
So I'll just say real quick, because you brought up Pythagoras. In the painting in Secret Teachings, right, by Manly P. Hall, there's a painting of Pythagoras, right?
Yes, I'll bring it up here.
Yeah, and so he's actually pointing to a circumpunct. He's pointing to a circle with a dot in the middle. So this is the monad, right? One way of looking at this great mother, Typhon, or Nuit, and her child, Set, or Hadit, in the Lovecraftian, in the Crowleyan way of looking at things, Nuit is like the complement of Hadit. So it's the feminine and the masculine. If you look at the circumpunct, the circle with a dot in it, the circle is feminine and the dot in the middle is masculine. So the circle is actually the cosmos and the dot in the middle is representative of the world or cosmic axis. It's the center of this reality. So that's another metaphor for people if they're trying to wrap their head around this information, is that Nuit, Typhon, the great mother, is the totality of everything. She's symbolic of the womb, and the cosmos is also a symbolic womb. and her child or son is in the middle. So the
We have
bullseye symbol, the target symbol, is basically, the same thing.
We have the tree here, and also on the episode that I did with Occultist Lux, he brought up the Tetractus as a different type of the tree of life, right? Like a different, again, not different type, but maybe it's the technology that they were using, right? It's a sort of tech that they were tapping into. Therefore, Pythagoras with this Tetractus, which is supposed to represent reality itself. It's supposed to represent, right? 4, that's materiality. You have 3, which is the triad, the trilogy, the mother, father, and the son. Then you have the duad, which is polarity, feminine, male, right, masculine, and then you have the monad at the top. And it's again, it's another form of looking at reality, and that's why he's attributed with the triangle, right? If you break everything down into thirds, into when you have a problem, 1/3, you take 1/3 of it, and you're halfway done essentially with the issue. Also, you have the Freemasonic compass here, and he's pointing towards it. Is that the part you were talking about here, where he's pointing in the center?
He's pointing to a drawing on the blueprint there, and so he's pointing to a circle with a dot in the middle, and also that pyramid that he has in his other hand is right in front of a pillar. Right? It's in front of a column. And Grant is saying in the Nightside of Eden that pillars and columns or standing stones relate to Set, because Set is another correspondence with the sacred center, basically, which exists at the north, essentially. So I think that's all very, very interesting stuff. Good question, dude, with the thigh and kind of what that's all about.
I finally found a better picture of it, but yeah, here we go. We have the vessel here. We have... This is going to trigger some people to globe earth there. And then you have the ladder in the back between the 2 pillars, which again could be a representation of Jacob's ladder in some sort of way.
Sure.
And this other tree here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, is it 10, I guess? Yeah. So
10 Sephiroth.
The lyre, I think this is a lyre where he talked about how he would walk around and play it with his followers. And if you're able to strike the certain frequency that a building was resonating at, you can bring down an entire building. So he was talking about cymatics, and again, he was just if he was even a real person, right?
That's the thing. And also the lyre or lyra, right? It's a constellation in the northern sky as well.
Interesting.
So that's how I tend to see things, man. That is one of my correspondences. So northern sky symbolism, these are the constellations. There's a lot to break down here. But if you go to the next slide, you'll see that this is just an image showing you the importance of the thigh of the bull. And they're cutting off that thigh. And again, this thigh corresponds with Ursa Major. Sometimes you'll actually literally see. So the thigh of Set sometimes has 7 stars within it. And again, Typhon, this great mother, is associated with 7 stars. If you cruise to the next couple, just showing you real quick the northern sky as, I see it. There's Polaris right there, right in the middle. So the handle of Ursa Minor literally leads to Polaris, and then Ursa Major is a bit further out. You can see that it's southern right there. This is where we get the swastika from.
You're going to get us canceled, Mario. You're going to get us canceled, bro.
This is where we get the swastika from. I believe this is also where we get the number 7 from. One of the myths that's really fascinating with all of this stuff, and I feel like I'm just flying through this material, but it's all good. One of the myths associated with Set and Typhon is that Set actually broke free from his mother's womb. And so, which is actually something that you'll see in Scorpio mythology as well, is that the babies chew or claw their way out of mother, which isn't actually true, but this is kind of a narrative that's been perpetuated for a really, really long time. And so there are interesting correspondences with knives and blades and axes with Set and with Typhon. And so if you go to the next slide, you're going to see an axe, like an Egyptian axe. And Kenneth Grant says in the book that the axe is literally a representation of also Ursa Major, right? And then if you go down, you'll see what's called an adze tool as well. And this adze tool is also another representation of Ursa Major. And so
is this the one that they used in the opening of the mouth ceremony?
Yeah, exactly. Yep, it's a woodworking tool, but it looks like the number 7. So I'm inclined to think that we literally get the shape of the number 7 from Ursa Major. That is where, so when you draw the number 7, you're drawing a little glyph of Ursa Major. And so the last thing that you'll see here, the next one, it's called, I always get the name wrong, a Khephesh, I believe, Khepsh.
Asking the wrong guy, bro.
So, dude, this is blowing my mind. It's so crazy. So let me read a little quote regarding this blade here. It's literally designed to mirror Ursa Major, right? So it says here, this is from Kenneth Grant, at least in my book, it's page 69. In the Egyptian hieroglyphics, the circle is one with Khephesh, goddess of the north. So it's saying that the Khephesh and the circle is related to the goddess of the north, which is Typhon. Her emblem is the crooked sword scythe, or the Smeter, which revolves around in the heavens, making the circle of time by cutting off periods. So they also related this blade to this circular nature that Ursa Major does around the pole star. The sword kept the way of the tree of life, thus establishing time in chaos. So they associated the cutting of this blade revolving around Polaris as what basically establishes time within the chaos of everything. Paradise was created by cutting off the chaos and timelessness and establishing the order of chaos. And the pillar is established in the void. So it's saying that cycles of time basically are what's brought order here. So in the realm of chaos, there's no time, and I don't think it's a completely different ball game than how we understand things here. So this blade going around the pole star is related to establishing order here, and also related to this pillar of Set, related to this bridge of Set. So because of time, Set's pillar can be established, and you can actually access this other place. You can go to the other place, or you can communicate with entities from the other place, because things have been differentiated. And what caused that differentiation is time and this cutting. And so they use cutting as a metaphor for the cosmos being whole and then now being divided. So now there's universe A and universe B. So there's actually two different places to interact with now because things were divided.
This is an interesting comment because, right, you referred to the number 7 as a glyph or sigil, if you will, to this symbol, this esoteric, which we know that secret societies revere the 7 stars. I mean, it's on different, I've seen it also on different flags. The Space Force has numerous references to it, right? But the crossing of the 7, I'm just thinking right now, that's a way of like canceling out whatever powers or something. And it was SB Alger that was talking to me about the works of somebody else, which I can't recall her name, but she was talking about how if you have a sigil, if you put the RX symbol on it, it kind of it cancels it out or something like that. And I'm thinking of this, when you draw the 7, everybody kind of does it differently. And sometimes I'll put that cross and turn the 7 into a cross, if you will, instead of it being the traditional 7, which right. I find that interesting.
Yeah, 7 has everything to do with cycles. It has everything to do with time. It has to do with the turning of the heavens around the pole star, which is why the 7th card of the major arcana is the Chariot card, because you're dealing with the spinning of the wheels.
My favorite.
Yeah, exactly. And so Cancer, most of it takes place during the 7th month of the year. But the number 7 has a lot to do with transformation. A lot of alchemical, traditions use the number 7. There's a whole tradition where people, especially in the East, they would do what's called a star walking ritual, and they would walk from star to star on Ursa Major to go to the other side. That is their ritual working, star stepping, some people have called it. And so, yeah, you mentioned the book earlier, but if people really want to know more about the number 7 and how it relates to ascension, Stairway to Heaven by Peter Levenda, he really gets into it in a very plain but kind of really just satisfying sort of way. He just gets right to the point with all this stuff, and I think it's interesting. There's not a lot of jargon, or there's not a lot of like crazy correspondences that you have to like Google and stuff like that.
And let's make a quick pit stop here. You mentioned water animals earlier.
Yeah.
And we have here, reality is non-being and the ego is the reflection or reverse of reality in the waters of the abyss. But not only is the image reversed, it is also inverted. And in terms of the draconian tradition, the ego is the mirage that appears in the desert of Set. Now, the reason I bring this up is because it's leading to this Egyptian idea, this thought where this is where it got weird for me, and I started bringing in other things where you brought up that chimeric looking, what was the goddess's name? The one with the Tiggo bitties?
Terawet.
Terawet. Well, I don't know if you caught in here. So here she is right here. Right. The idea of, let's talk about the frog and how they revere the frog because it's a sign of like sort of metamorphosis, this transformation. The frog can transcend dimensions. Essentially, it goes from living in the water to then living on land. You have, doesn't the Lovecraft have these, is it frog people? I don't think it's frog people. And the story of, I think it's not Dagon, the one where it's in the town, Innsmouth. I think it's Innsmouth, where it's like these weird fish people, right? They go in the water and they come out and they torment the town. But this idea of existing in two realms at once, which is essentially what we're seeing here now. You're able to exist in this B universe, this shell, this husk of another universe, the shadow of the main universe, if you will, the darker aspects of it, and kind of coexist in this reality as well. And you're able to transcend. And I think that the frog, you see that, and I think astrology as well. The frog is used, or astrological symbolism at least. And the reason I say is because in one of not Henry Plant, Henry Flagler, which is one of the founders of Florida, he has this fountain at one of his famous hotels where it's surrounded by frogs, and it's got like the pillar in the center of it, again, fallacy. And then it was like, we were trying to figure out what the frog meant. It's like, well, it represents this transcending of dimensions, if you will. And so
jumping, leaping between dimensions. That's one of the other metaphors.
Now, I don't know how I'm going to tie this in, but this is something that I wanted to talk about, right? Because we have here the dogs, right? The dog to the infernal realms derives from Egypt, where the jackal or desert fox is a typical denizen of the abyss. And both these animals being totems of Set. The symbolism. So is God to live in a dog? No, but the highest are of us. Dog, which is the word God in reverse, indicates the pylon of Doth, through which the dog of reason enters the abyss and perishes. A God is not to live in a dog, but the highest of us are. The highest is the height represented by the eighth head of the serpent that dwells in the abyss. The highest are of us. So this idea, right, of the dog. Now, dog spelled backwards is God. I did a whole breakdown on dogs and the occult on this familiar episode that I recently did. Nice. And the idea that all these occultists had dogs in Goethe's Faust, right? Satan, Mephistopheles, presents himself as a dog, this black shaggy dog, right? So we're talking about God. The dog is considered man's best friend. And again, this is where it's going to get unorthodox for me, at least, because one of my guilty, stay with me, okay? One of my guilty pleasures is Dogman. Okay.
Oh, I love Dogman stuff.
All right. So yeah, Dogman. Now, I'm trying to find where in this other area he talks about lycanthropy, and he refers to it as failed attempts to crossing the abyss, right? Crossing over to the abyss. Now, there's a realm on this tree that time moves backwards, right? Time moves backwards. And you mentioned at the beginning that a lot of people go crazy when they are interacting and meddling and dabbling in these arts and using this system, which I believe Grant says it somewhere in here. It's satanic. It's Luciferian technology, I believe is what he calls it. Or maybe I heard that somewhere else. But again, it's a sort of Luciferian tech. Now, this idea of transgressing back in time, you enter this this other dimension where time moves backwards. Now, when people get lost in this and they're not able to stop the transgressing back in time, he says it in the book, it's attributed to the magical werewolf, pretty much, the wereman, lycanthropy. And the reason that stood out to me was because I've always talked about the dog man being like some sort of skin suit that people are able to project their consciousness into and just do shenanigans, right, in reality. And it's not too far-fetched, because in another one of these dimensions, failed attempts of creating chimeras are able to pop in through to this existence. That reminds me of what? Stranger Things, where these monsters come through from the other side into their realm and they have to fight them and all this stuff, or they go into their realm and they fight them inside there, right? So this idea of it being a portal for these chimeras, because in some of these tunnels, there are these beasts or these entities. Also, Goetia is howling.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Crowley says that. He refers to it as howling. Goetia is also bellowing, or I forgot the other etymology if I broke it down. So the idea of using this system in order to transcend your consciousness and lead yourself to a point of no return consciously would make sense. Now, another thing that stood out to me was that when they're in this other realm, and the occultists that are obsessed with the crossing of the abyss, which we know that Parsons did this a lot. We know Crowley was obsessed with this. We know there's various different occultists that were dabbling in this, of going into the abyss, crossing in the abyss, the Bornless One ritual, right? Where there's this idea of, again, leaving your ego behind. And once you leave your ego behind, then you're able to essentially do whatever you want to do. And again, this is not my ideas, but from what I've read. And I'm trying to find the part where he talks about the magical lycanthrope. So bear with me. But this idea of he talks about it, and I related this to Jung and another. You know about Grant Morrison?
No, not really.
So he is the creator of the Invisibles, and he is an advocate for chaos magic. And essentially, he wrote a comic book, and in the comic book, it was about him. And essentially, whenever he would write a story about his character that represented him, which was his sigil, essentially, whatever he did to that character would happen to him in real life.
Oh, I've heard stuff like this before. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, this sort of hyper sigil type of thing. He teaches people how to make a sigil. And in one of his lectures that he gave, he talked about how he went on a trip. He did a psychedelic trip. And he was shown by these entities. Because again, the extraterrestrial agenda is real when it comes to these occultists.
Yeah.
Some people think it's a psyop. I mean, Crowley he was supposedly a spy. So, I mean, these are guys that in history had ties to 3-letter agencies that could have potentially planted these ideas in occultism, and therefore they're brought forth and people, right, they jump onto those ideas. But that's a whole nother conversation. But in this trip, Grant was presented reality, existence, as some sort of larva, right? And that we're a larva. Existence is a sort of, humanity is like a sort of larva that these higher entities tap into and draw energy from that, right? Well, coincidentally enough, if I'm able to find the frickin' passage, he talks about transgressing far enough in time to a larval existence that was anti-human before humans. But the problem with the crossing of the abyss is that some initiates, some occultists aren't able to stop that transgression through time when they're in this other dimension going backwards in time. And then they're kicked into the abyss by the dog-headed ape. He talks about the divine ape, which, I mean, if you want to tie in Joe Rogan's symbolism, right? People in the mainstream light with the apes, or you have the divine ape. So they're knocked into this abyss where, again, I guess they lose their selves, essentially, is what that means. And I related this to something that I had seen before with Carl Jung. And let me pull up the picture here. But essentially what I'm getting at is, what if this is a sort of technology in order to invoke, these other states of being, which I mean, is not too far-fetched if you're talking about tapping into powers that are beyond your comprehension. But one of the drawings that really stood out to me during this whole thing was Carl Jung painted this mandala, one of his first mandalas in like 19 something or other. I don't remember one, but this is reality essentially. And also Jung talked about the dimensions of the frog as well, which is an interesting connection. But we have, right, mundus exterior, which is the reality that we're able to perceive. You have the demiurge there. And in Gnostic cosmology, you have to transcend these spheres in order to achieve and become one with the Godhead, which is essentially another goal of this system that we're discussing right now. Achieving this Godhead, or tapping into these goetic energies, if you will, in order to extract power from them. Well, one of the things that always stood out to me in this drawing was these larvae. And what do we have here? Right. We have the tree. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, okay, what? And I've labeled this pupa reality. This theory that I'm working on right now with this, that maybe we're not these little worms or larvae, whatever it is, but the larval existence. And I want to look for the passage because I'm having a hard time finding it. But that just blew my mind, bro. And again, it's connecting ideas that I wouldn't have otherwise connected if it wasn't for this book, where, again, I am seeing connections that they're weird. I mean, don't get me wrong. That's a very weird idea, but it's even weirder that they label it the way that they did. You know what I mean?
Oh, dude. Yeah. I mean, when I look at a larva, how different is a larva from like a worm?
Not much.
As an example, right? How different is that from like a sea cucumber? And so when you're dealing with these real, or even, and then I would say a really advanced version of that would be like a serpent or something. But basically, you're dealing with a creature that has an in, as in the mouth, and then it has an out, as in the anus.
And they're hermaphrodites too.
Right. Totally. And so that's the basic sort of framework for all life here, is that there's a mouth, food goes in, it gets processed, and then it comes back out, right? This is the torus field. The torus field, energy goes in and it gets spit out, only to return back to itself. And so when you're dealing with tubular symbolism, you are dealing with a toroidal sort of concept. And even, like us, when we're in our mother's womb, and as embryos are developing and stuff, my understanding is that before the heart becomes a heart, because the heart isn't a pump, by the way, that's kind of a whole thing that you can look into, that the heart works in a different way than what we've been taught in school. And so it's not just this mechanical pump. What it actually is, it's a tube that twists into itself. And so it's fibrous. So you can actually unravel a heart. I don't know if you've ever seen that before, but you can unravel a heart, because really the heart is toroidal in nature as well. Our whole circulatory system is toroidal in nature. Blood gets pumped and then it returns back to where it got pumped from. And so everything is in this looping sort of cycle, just like the torus field, pretty much. And so I think that the larva, I think that the worm, I think the serpent, I think a lot of these simple creatures, it's encoding a lot of that information. And then also the demiurge too. I usually think of the demiurge as being lion-headed with a serpent body, but there's variations out there where it's actually a body of a worm, right? And so there's worm symbolism associated with the demiurge as well. Sometimes you could see it in its illustrations. It actually looks more worm-like than actually
parasitic.
Serpentine. Yes, right? Totally.
Parasitic in nature. So, absolutely. And I found the passage as well. So These two, subject and object, unite, and their union causes change, which is the formula of magic. Union occurs in consciousness, where the act is reflected as in a mirror, and the act opens the gate through which the will is projected. Its image appears in the mirror world, at the back of the tree and in reverse, for in that dimension time flows backwards and man reverts to ape. Okay. Now, it's interesting because I also linked this to the homunculus, where in these homunculus grimoires, these instructions, one of the instructions is to become an ape. You're able to turn yourself, the practitioner, or somebody that you know, into an ape, right? And it plays into the divine ape idea. And so the cynocephalus was chosen, therefore, as a magical symbol of the world by the ancient Egyptians, who attributed it to the moon god Thoth. And he's Thoth's little dog, right? His little servant. It's like a little monkey-headed little dog. Now, the name of that god, of this god, is equivalent to Da'ath. And so he goes on to here, the cynocephalus, or dog-headed ape, utters the word of the magus in reverse. And this is where it gets weird, because he says the formula of reversion, and we have Austin Spar, realize that in order to become God, man must regress to the primal original state of consciousness. This is the ultimate rationale behind the attempts by occultists of all ages to leap backward and inward to the interior depths of the tree, thereby reverting to the pre-evolved state of consciousness before Kether transmitted the current of manifestation from the eye of the void. And here we go. Many magicians go astray on that backwards journey. Their consciousness assumes forms of larval life that antedated the human. Then the ape of Thoth mocks them as they struggle to extricate themselves from a swiftly accelerating reversion of consciousness that finally hurls them into oblivion. Such is the fate peculiar to adepts who, nurturing their animal propensities while in the abyss, assume the form of beasts. And then the little footnote, this is the origin of the magical lycanthropy and similar occult phenomenon. So if we have the idea of the dog man, again, being this, going back in time to not only become this larval existence, which I'm talking about here, and there's also a show that Donut showed to me, where there is I forgot the name of the show. I don't know if Donut's still in the chat, but there's a little larva, a pupa, where in the show the little larva is actually like sent from like these other these aliens, these other entities, to like infiltrate the humans in that reality, and essentially that larva is going to grow big enough to swallow up the entire universe and bring forth its people back into existence. Again, it's a very, I told you I was going to get weird with it, so don't judge me. But the idea of transgressing back into this anti-larval, anti-human existence. And I think this is what they talk about with, again, looking into this sort of thing, because I'm sure people, when they're reading about this, and this is the dangers of people who tell me, oh, well, Crowley was speaking in code, or some of the things mentioned in this book are in code. Yeah, there were alchemists as well, right? There were cryptographers. They were occulting the truth, because only the initiated were able to tap into that. But the problem isn't that, Mario. The problem is that those who aren't initiated, who are reading this and read that one specific formula, they're going to do it by however that formula says to do it. Mm-hmm. Right. You know what I mean? And hey, sure, you might get some results. I mean, maybe not the results that you wanted, but you're going to get some results. And that's why people who, when I talk about the homunculus, oh, that's all symbolic. Yeah, it probably is. But you're going to have that one Florida man who's going to go ahead and one day crack open that grimoire and follow it step by step, right? Steps 1 through 12 or whatever it is to try and make a homunculus. And he's going to be doing everything, because you have the law of correspondence as well. It's not that, you're using these materials in order, like, physically, but the law of correspondence. And again, you have the use of different instruments in ceremonies. But it's not a dagger. The representation of what that dagger represents on these higher realms, on these higher existence or different dimensions, if you will.
Right.
So,
right. Okay. Very cool, man. I think it's intriguing for a few reasons. But let me just riff on this for a second. When you said larva, I had no idea we were going to be talking about this. But when you said larva, the first thing that kind of came to my mind was a maggot, right? And so
Magus.
exactly right, magician for sure. And so to me, maggot of all names, MAG, magnetism, right? Magic. And even the magician card, being that first card, that number 1 being symbolic of polarity, right? And all of these different types of things. I think of electricity, right? And the polarity needed to conduct electricity and all of that. And then also, the maggot turns into a fly. I think of the maggot, I think of decaying carcasses and things like that. So really there's this destructive element kind of going on, but it's to serve the maggot, right? But we tend as humans to associate it with things that are rotten and whatnot. That's when they appear, So the symbolism behind that is very interesting as it relates to some of the stuff you're talking about. And also,
you're spitting some hot fire right now, Mario, because from putrefaction, from essentially rotting, is what these alchemists of back then believed that life came forth from. They believed that the chicken warming the egg up was rotting the egg, putrefying the egg, and then when they're like, oh look, it rotted the egg, and a little baby chick came out of that egg. So therefore, through putrefaction. Right? That is, we leave a piece of meat out. What's the first thing to come from that? The maggot.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
The fly, dude. Oof.
So check this
Fire.
out too. The magician card is the first card in the major arcana right after the fool card, which is 0. That's 0, and the fool card represents chaos, and then that 1 represents order. So order out of chaos is what's going on there, right? And when you look at the Crowley version of the magician card, you are dealing not just that version of the card, but you're dealing with mercurial symbolism pretty much, right? So it corresponds with Mercury and the powers of Mercury, and Mercury relating to the phallus, being a traveler, going between realms via, in my opinion, the world axis or cosmic axis, via the stairway of Set, right? In the Crowley version of that card, you have that ape down below. I'm not sure if you've ever noticed it, but you've got that ape looking away from the viewer.
Yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so to me, that's an intriguing thing as well, as you've been talking about this ape symbolism. Also, I know in the Vedic side of things that Hanuman, their ape deity, he corresponds with Mercury, actually. So my understanding is that he had a more clear correspondence way back when, and that some sort of perversion or distortion happened over the ages. But that is his original essence, is very, very mercurial. The other thing I wanted to mention regarding dog symbolism is basically repeating what I said earlier regarding the fact that one of the myths with the typhonian tradition is that the mother, the goddess of the 7 stars, has an 8th star that is her child, and that 8th star is Sirius, which is also known as Sothis, or the dog star. And so literally the dog star correspondence being the child of Typhon, this great mother, is just something else I wanted to throw out there.
Yeah, and the idea that I forgot where else I read that. Let's see here. We have is God to live in a dog, but the highest of us are. The dog is which the word God in reverse indicates the pylon of dot through which the dog of reason enters the abyss and perishes. I forgot where I read that. I don't think it was here, but the idea that infernal tormented soul. Oh no, it was in my presentation actually of dogs. That dogs supposedly tormented souls. If they had a violent death, they're reincarnated as dogs. That's what I heard. And yeah, it's an interesting connection. And we have here the orangutan. Thank you, Elliot, for reminding me to bring this up because, right, we're talking about the divine ape, this ape symbolism in the grimoires of the homunculus. you have the idea of turning into an ape, right? Becoming an ape, which I found very interesting. And when you start to get into the chapter of the divine ape, where he gets into all this, the zoomorphic symbol of the mirror universe. Let's see here, the divine ape. And then he starts to relate this to the fool, right? And I didn't make the connection, but the fool, what does he have with him?
A dog. Right.
Usually has a dog with him. And at least in the Nap Hall deck, the Wheel of Fortune, they have some weird symbolism in that where it's like a dog-headed man. And let's see here. What number is the Wheel of Fortune?
10.
So 10, right? The perfect number for the Pythagoreans. Yeah. Well, we have this weird dog-headed, and again, it's nice. Mercury, right? Is this representation of Mercury?
Yeah.
And you have the Tetractys here, of course.
Nice.
So again, this weird dog-headed man, for some reason, that goes back to the dog. The God backwards is dog, and then I'll
say, sorry, just real quick regarding this wheel symbolism. Is so notice that the three figures are always in three different positions. One is going up, one is at its apex, and then one is coming down. So there's many ways of interpreting what's going on here. But typically, just look at the bull-headed figure going down, and it's holding a trident, right? It's associating it with this descended sort of symbolism. Ooh. So while the dog man is actually ascending, and he's holding a symbol of Mercury, and Mercury is related to the world axis, is related to this stairway to heaven stuff. So it's ascending, so it's transforming, basically. Which I think is just worth pointing out. But yeah, go for it, dude.
Beautiful card. What? That's crazy though, right? This is Hall with Augustus Snap, the one that painted that the Pythagoras we pulled up at the beginning. He did this deck with him. So the idea that they put the dog at the top, right, and this is like the Satan or the inversion, that archetype. I don't know, man. It's telling me something about the dog.
Absolutely,
right? So we have here the zoomorphic symbol of the mirror universe, and it's talking about the as of the astral universe is the ape. The animal is identified by Massey as keke, an Egyptian word meaning not only ape but a crazy man, Florida man, if you will, a fool. Keke is another form of gege or ge, the insane woman, the witch, the archetype of the Hek or Hecate, hex, hag type of transformation, as the heck that changes from the tadpole into the frog. So we have this connection of, again, chaos, connecting with the whole phenomenon. I don't know if you saw the documentary, The Dividers, where it was like they were trolling him. But anyways, I mean, when I think of, 4chan, I think of a cesspool. I think it's like another sort of Twitter. Yeah. Right? Just a whole bunch of trolls.
Meme magic.
Meme magic, exactly. We see this frogman, if you will, in these circles. And so the Harris Papyrus, there is an allusion to a transformation in which the lion god assumes the form of an ape. And here we go. The fool of the tarot, called the ape of 7 cubits, who dwells in the shrine of 7 cubits, from which he progresses to a shrine of 8 cubits. I don't know, can you confirm that? The fool of the tarot, called the ape of the 7 cubits?
I've never heard of that before.
Right?
Yeah, that's new to me.
So he is the symbol of the culmination of the 7 inferior elementaries in the 8th, thus explaining the madness experienced by the adept as the 7 souls or stages of his initiation, which accumulates in the ordeal of the abyss. And that made a lot of sense to me, because what is the fool staring into? Where is he staring into?
Yeah,
he's staring into the abyss.
That's right. Yeah.
So that made a whole bunch of sense to me. And here we go. So the orangutan, where does all this fall into? According to rabbinical lore. Now, this is Grant. These aren't my words. I'm just a researcher. So before anybody goes crazy, there's some people in the chat talking shit. Fuck you. Adam was created with a tail in the likeness of an orangutan. Gerald Massey, who quotes the tradition, explains it by observing that the Jews were not evolutionists. The tradition witnesses the survival of Egyptian typology. So the fool, ape, or crazy man, the Gek or Geke, I guess how you say it, is the Ge of Persian lore, the scarlet woman of biblical lore, and she that is described by, can't say that name, as the active agent of hell. Now, we have the orangutan, and then I did a posting to bring it full circle with Jung. I did a post, this short, and it was about Carl Jung's Red Book. Again, Carl Jung, one of the people who was kind of sort of diving into the shadow realm, right? Looking into the abyss of himself. And he eventually went crazy. Again, it goes back to this idea of if you mess around, if you stare long enough into the abyss is going to stare back into you. Look at what happened to Nietzsche. He also went crazy, right? Was it because he was dabbling in the occult, or was it something else, right? They say he died of syphilis. I don't know, right? But this idea of going crazy, Crowley, a lot of his wives went crazy. And essentially, I mean, if you want to say Austin Osman Spar went crazy, all these people lost their minds. And so I posted this about the Red Book, which the Red Book was essentially the paranormal of Jung. He took the occult and pretty much turned it into, from a scientific point of view. He was interacting with these entities that were messing around with him, and he was able to interact with them through writing and through journaling. So through the solidification of writing it down, you solidify these things into existence, or you're able to somehow talk to them or interact with them. Now, when I posted this, Elliot was like, is that an orangutan? So again, is it an orangutan? What is it? Is it a guy, or it kind of looks like an orangutan, or
interesting. Yeah, I mean, look at that glyph there, right? So it's called some people refer to it as the quartered circle, right? And depending on who you ask, a lot of people today, if you look in modern symbolism books, which I have many, a lot of people say that it's a solar glyph, that it's related to the sun. My personal interpretation is that it's actually more so a polar glyph, as in related to the cosmic axis, as in the center of Earth at the North Pole, and then the four directions, or the four corners of Earth, if you will. And actually, Kenneth Grant, I don't know if you picked up on this, but in Nightside, he actually talks about this glyph in one of the tunnels.
Really?
And because this glyph is part of one of the sigils of one of the tunnels, basically. And he says that the cross, when you have a cross within a circle, he says that it's symbolic of crossing the abyss at the north.
At the north.
Yeah. So to me, that was fascinating. I remember highlighting that.
I'd be interested to see where this takes place, like where this is.
Right.
Because if it's a symbol of that, right? Why would he pick this again? It's just interesting connections. Might be nothing, but I just thought I'd bring it up because he gets into this ape, and then I related it to the homunculus, and he talks about here this creation was sucked into manifestation not only from the extraterrestrial but also from the extra dimensional sources via the tunnel under the path of the fool on the adverse side of the tree. So we have here, let me go back. The menstrual flow, symbolizing the disruption of continuity, was used by the Parsis to typify the mechanism by which the evil one exterminated the fire of Zarathustra, which Nietzsche talked about. Zarathustra had brought from heaven the water that damped the fire of the spirit, the water of the abyss, the negative power that swept in by means of the ape or fool. So again, just interesting connections that I wouldn't have otherwise. And then he relates it to Lovecraft's fictions, that the actual beast was more hideous than the ape or any presently known species of animal may be appreciated after reading a description of the pre-evolved figurine of Antarctic origin described in certain of Lovecraft's fictions. So here he is. Every now and again, he'll bring in these aspects of Lovecraft in order to parallel them to his ideas. And he talks about the octopoid cephalopod.
Yeah.
Right. And then it's interesting because they get into this idea of these chimeras being born in this other realm. and they call them typhonian. What's the name of the stuff? I got it here somewhere. But anyways, the typhonian teratomas, which is these creatures of failed attempts, right, of other occultists or something or other, and they break down the lineage of all these. He even brings up the Nephilim in this, bro. Like, he's even talking about the Nephilim and all this stuff in this book. So again, very interesting.
Yep, that's why I really appreciated going through it, is because he talked about a lot of different things, and he understands, as you understand, that symbolism matters. When you're getting into this kind of material, dude, I mean, you just have to be symbolically literate. You have to be symbolically aware. And so he's just throwing out all sorts of different correspondences and stuff. So I found it to be very valuable. But,
yeah, he says here real quick in the Typhonian teratomas, which part of the homunculus lore is being able to create these other beings, right? The chimeras, essentially. And he talks about here the teratomas, the dragon and the ape, were the archetypes. Dragons died out, but yet the ape survived as the symbol of the degradation of the gods in their traffic with embodied life force. And he talks about the Book of Enoch, Epic of Gilgamesh, and according to the secret doctrine, these beasts are the outcome of pre-human magical experiments by extraterrestrials who copulated with primitive women. The fact that such congress also occurred between the higher Semia and the lower human was mentioned by P.B. Randolph as proof of the possibility of such interbreeding, in support of which he cites the tailed men of Namakwa land, the dwarf people of Gorilla land, and the Osprey. So P.B. Randolph, which is pretty much he brought sex magic into the mainstream in the Western occultism, and I think he was murdered, and he actually had like some fight with Blavatsky. So another interesting guy. I'm sorry, what were you gonna say?
Oh no, I mean, you keep on bringing up the Fool, and so I just wanted to mention the Fool and the interesting correspondence with Sirius, the Dog Star. And if you just want to pull up the graphic that I sent you in the private chat real quick, it just illustrates it really quickly. But basically, some people have speculated that the Fool symbolically in the night sky is Orion, and then Sirius, the Dog Star, Canis Major, is down below to the lower left. And it is kind of a curious correspondence when you look at it that way. So is it mirroring, something going on in the heavens, basically? Just like what you're saying, the Dog Star following the Fool and all that kind of stuff.
All right. This leads me to my next just wacky theory.
That's what I'm here for, dude.
All right. So real quick, Tronzon manifests as the Scarlet Woman, a form of Babylon, as the first opening or gateway, the beginning represented by blood, the scarlet fluid of incarnation. Babel or Babel means gate of God, and as such is equated with the northern gate of Eden. Heaven, interpreted Kabbalistically as Da'ath, Al, or El, is 31, the key number of the new Aeon, and as fully explained in the trilogy. So there was something for you, bro. Northern gate of Eden. Did your nipples get hard when you read that part?
Dude, they've been
Tell
hard
me how
this
that made
whole
you
entire
feel.
time.
Oh, dude, nice. So, all right. One of the things that I first encountered when reading this was, and again, it goes back to that Jungian mandala, where it's showing the different layers of existence, and we have the outside one, which is the perceivable reality. But one of the things that he says in this book is that Pluto, and I think I mentioned it to you, or I mentioned it to somebody. Here he goes. So in the first chapter, the place of the cross, right? The first chapter, Pluto represents the pylon at the gates of the sanctuary of inner space. Now it's inner space, right? Mm-hmm. But Pluto represents the outermost power zone, the pylon at the outermost rim of the planetary system, beyond the vast of outer space. Now this is an interesting concept because we know that some people don't believe in space, right? Space is fake and gay, or however the kids say it nowadays, right? They have all these ideas, the world is flat, whatever, et cetera, et cetera. But hear me out, Mario. We never went to the moon, right? That's the conspiracy. We have Parsons, who was one of the most prominent, and I'm not going to say greatest because he was the degenerate as well, but one of the more known and more powerful occultists, I guess, right? Who was supposedly in charge and created the fuel that allegedly put us on the moon, if you want to believe the mainstream narrative.
Right.
Now, cosmicism, which is related to outer space, which was presented through H.P. Lovecraft, makes me think of something, made me come to a conclusion that what if they want us to believe in space, not for us, but for them? And by them, I mean the occultists, because it's part of their magical practice. Here we have Grant talking about extraterrestrial entities from outer space, right? All these different things, outer space, outer space, outer space. Well, what if the reason that we don't go to outer space is because it's a sort of initiation? Right. What if it's a rite of initiation and you actually could, everything that he's describing in this book could happen to you if you were to cross that abyss, which is space. And what if they send these people not to space, but somewhere else? And I didn't find more evidence, but I'm going to refer to the first conference from the moon landing, where they're not even happy. They're kind of soulless.
Dude, I know, right? Exactly.
Right? They're like, if you think that you made one small step for mankind or whatever it was, leap, if you want to believe all that, don't you think you'd be ecstatic when you came back instead of, right? They're very down and very soulless. And I mean, what's his name? The guy that's his name is backward, Neil. His name backwards, Alien. He kind of went crazy too, right? He was kind of cuckoo at the end of his life, talking all this gibberish.
Yep.
Well, what if this is like a rite of passage for them, like a sort of initiation, and they know this and they're able to use it for whatever it is? And I mean, you have the greatest troll who uses the frog symbolism, Musk, one of the most powerful people in the world, launching things into outer space.
Dude, well,
what do you think?
Onto something. Yeah, man. So there's
Am I crazy?
No, you're not. And so there's a few reasons why space and the concept of space has been completely obfuscated and distorted and inverted. I have a quote right here from Grant. The abyss typifies the primal mother as space. So I've been saying this for a little while now, when you look into the night sky, you are looking into the spirit realm. And that spirit realm symbolically corresponds with the Great Mother. So the abyss typifies the primal mother as space. We, in this conversation, are talking more about actual, literal, real space travel than we would be if we were talking about rockets going to different planets, right? So what's happened is they've turned space into this material existence, and I can see why. People look in outer space and they see this thing and it kind of looks like it's whatever. But point being, I just don't think that we can go for various reasons, but you can go via supposedly the methods that we're actually kind of outlining here. You know, so I think that has been the great inversion, is that these guys right here, they're space traveling more than the astronauts that you just talked about.
Boom. And if you think of these rituals that they do, what does the rocket represent? Exactly. What does it represent? It's the phallus.
100%.
Alchemy is known as the religion of fire. Well, what are the phalluses spewing out? Fire, right? Yeah, exactly. We're talking about the burning, the transmutation of the projection, because that's what they're doing. They're taking these substances and allegedly, right, making this fire with it. So what if it's more of like just a sort of ritual, and these people aren't actually going out, and how you're saying the ones that are actually doing this, and part of the Lima, what's their whole thing? We are all stars.
Right.
What if, again, what if they were onto something that, and I'm just thinking outside the box right now. I'm just like thinking above and beyond as I'm reading this crazy ass book of using demons to extract power from them, and I'm just making all these other connections, right? The key to the mystery of redeeming or revivifying the mummy in Amenta lies in the magical use of the fire snake. Well, a fire snake can kind of be like some sort of, right? You have the rocket ship is kind of like a sort of fire breathing snake. I mean, again, he names all his rockets Musk, Dragon, or whatever it was, right? He uses all these different names.
Exactly,
And then the
yeah.
fact that the Space Force uses the 7-star symbolism in all their flags or whatever, their sigils, essentially, their symbols. So again, bro, I told you I was going to get a little bit weird on this one. I wanted to let loose a little bit on some of my more unorthodox ideas. And I'm glad to know that you're not judging me too hardcore for them, but I'm here to have
dude,
fun.
no
right?
way. You totally got it, man. Honestly, I think that is what's going on. And so when you're sending a rocket to space, you're basically the sexual symbolism is completely off the charts because it's the phallus going to the feminine. It's the phallus going to the great mother. So it's reuniting with that aspect of the cosmos being the womb, if you will. So there's fertility symbolism going on with all of it, and it 100% is ritualistic. And so they've just duped everyone into thinking that it's actually the real thing. But when you look into this occult material, I think this is more accurate to how you can space travel.
We got some hard nipples in the chat right now. Yeah, sorry to do this to you guys, but again,
Good stuff, dude.
I was excited to get together with you, Mario, because I knew that I could, there's certain people in the community who I can let loose with, and I feel like you're one of the ones that I can present these other abstract, crazier ideas without getting judged too hardcore. If I was to do that with Thomas, he'd totally judge me, bro. He'd call me names, but
Hell yeah,
so
dude.
I'm here for it.
I'm happy to be in that small circle.
So we have here, again, he goes on to the Divine Ape, which I found super interesting. And he just goes on and on. And one of the things here, let's see here. The ancients were aware of the crack in space through which such an invasion could pour in more of the great mystery schools. So, one of the things that stood out to me, I was like, all right. Because again, maybe if the mainstream media, what they're painting to us isn't what has been taught to us. Okay, what isn't what's actually going on. And he talks about the breach has been made by nuclear activity that has disturbed the balance of the ions, and unless the correct keys are applied, the circle of human consciousness will be invaded by powers from the other side. Now, the ancients were aware of the crack in space through which such an invasion could pour, and more than one great mystery school has hoisted Da'ath as the point of entry. The myth of the old ones returning to reclaim the thrones of the earth is a very ancient theme. We see that, right? God is going to come back, right? The gods are watching you, right? The gods are going to make their return. Ragnarok, the apocalypse, the unveiling, etc., etc. So, Thrones of Earth is a very ancient theme, and one that has been revived in recent decades, not only in the fictional writings of such natural sensitives as Arthur Machen, he goes H.P. Lovecraft, but also in the writings of physicists who are aware of the occult implications revealed by nuclear and subnuclear research. Some people think nukes are fake and gay, but I mean, who knows? And it is only now that certain ancient occult traditions, especially those concerning the Tree of Life, may be read otherwise than a superstitious dread of evil spirits. And he goes on to describe black holes, which has been likened to a sponge or donut, or a solid mass perforated by wormholes like, he says, some sort of cheese. Gives some idea of the anatomy of the multi-dimensional tree. The wormholes are the hells or hidden holes unnoticed because dwarfed by the spheres of the Sephiroth. Now, he talks about how, another interesting connection, behind this tree, when you are not to panic when you enter this other reality, and you might panic because your brain is not able to understand this extraterrestrial landscape that is beyond your comprehension, this non-Euclidean geometry, and how H.P. Lovecraft talks about it, where this, an obtuse angle that isn't obtuse, and an acute angle that isn't quite acute. It's like this thing that is always changing as you observe it. And one of the things that stood out to me, because we see the bee symbolism a lot in these secret societies, and also the bee is prevalent in the homunculus rituals or ceremonies or experiments. But he says that the backside of the tree is honeycombed. We see the Freemasons have the bee symbolism.
Right.
We have the bee man, wicker man, right? You have the bees and wicker man, and wicker literally means the warping of reality, the warping of perception, wicker. So I don't know, man. I think that there's a lot of talks about space and stuff in here, and I was like, man, there's something else to it. I think there's something else to it, right? And I think that's why maybe they don't want you dabbling into all of this sort of stuff, because again, it's the occult for a reason, and I have the utmost respect for it. But this dude is on to some next level stuff. And again, I don't know if I'm reaching with my conclusions, but that's just the way I see it, man.
No, man, I don't think you are personally. The honeycomb thing, that's really fascinating. You know, it's almost like looking at the scaffolding of something, right? So if you see a beehive, you're not going to see the honeycombs necessarily, right? They're going to be within the hive, right? And who rules the beehive? It's the queen. You know, it's the queen of heaven, right? So that kind of symbolism also translates over, I would say, for, you know, in a few different ways. But yeah, you know, there's so much stuff going on in that book. I read it from cover to cover, and you're bringing up things that I did read for sure, but I do not remember.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, it's not, there's going to be a follow up to this because there's just so much. I mean, there's too much to cover. And if you want, we can, again, there's some stuff that the ape was the type of transformation and resurrection of the spirit. The name of the ape was Ion, which means the howling animal of the desert. It is the primeval logos, word, or speaker, whose ion or eon is represented by Ta or Da'ath, the place of the crossing or transforming spirit, the place where the spirit crossed over the abyss to lodge in the hidden shrine, there to be devoured by demons of Choronzon. So this weird ape symbolism, and it brings me back, Galen, I believe it was. The first dissections that they would do was with apes, but they stopped. They stopped doing the dissections to learn the anatomy of apes because it's the closest resembling of humans. They stopped because it was too human-like. Apes, and specific apes. In these, you know, in these, that's mainstream history, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure.
It's like, why'd they stop using? Oh, just. But what if they knew something? Like, what if they were initiates? Because I have this huge project coming out. That required me to translate works, and I was able to secure a translation of the Liber Vacay in an old medical book from 1401. Okay, so the idea that physicians back then were magicians, right? So we're talking about Galen, one of the first physicians, essentially, and the idea that he again, there's a reason why the Liber Vacay is a grimoire that's a pseudo-Galen text. It's attributed to Galen, but did he actually write it? No. The reason that they did that is because it was like a pen name for them. But why pick Galen out of all the people? In order to write about the creation of a homunculus that also requires the use of an ape, and you're able to use the homunculus to turn yourself into an ape. Again, I don't know what all that means, but it's just an interesting connection that I saw as I'm doing this research. And so he goes on to talk about nuclear explosions. He talks about how back then certain regions of the Gobi Desert bears the scars of nuclear explosion. Mm-hmm. And he's going on and on. Now, did you have anything to add? And I think we can wrap up on some of the demons, I guess, of the and their power, the powers that are attributed to them. I don't have a lot on that, because again, that's not something I'm that interested in, but I did note some of the entities and their powers that they give to you.
Right. You know, maybe one thing I think could be helpful for people is to pull up, there's a couple of tarot cards that I have in that PDF, and one is the Star card, and then the other one is the Lust card. And just to kind of illustrate or show you the correspondence between these tunnels as well. I'm more so interested in the whole system. You know, I'm like you, the demonic aspect and the specific nuances of the various tunnels. I'm intrigued by it for sure, you know, and there's stuff that I'm gleaning from it, but I'm getting more out of trying to understand the system first. And so if you'll notice, so this is a Lon Milo Duquette deck. So he's part of the OTO. I think he's like I tried to look for his official title, and it was like governing officer or something like that. But he has magical titles as well. But this is his deck. He's in the know. He's written about some of this material, the Clipothic tree and all that kind of stuff. And it finally occurred to me, I finally realized what the glyphs are in the lower right-hand corner. Because I was actually, for years I've had this deck, and I'm like, what are those glyphs? I don't know. I haven't seen them in any of my books. Granted, I did not go out of my way to research and like see what people are saying about it. But what do you know? Kenneth Grant and the Nightside of Eden finally, unveiled their meaning, and they are actually the glyphs that relate to the various tunnels, right? So literally within the tarot, within his deck, he's actually putting the tunnel's sigil right there in the lower right-hand corner, so that you can have this easy correspondence between this card corresponds with this tunnel. So there's 22 tunnels, there's 22 cards in the major arcana, and there's 22 Hebrew letters. There's a correspondence between all of these things, and there's 22 paths on the normal tree of life as well. So the tree of life, those paths would be more of the exoteric right-hand path way of looking at what is intended behind the energy with those paths from Sephiroth to Sephiroth. The tunnels would be the shadow side of all of that stuff. So this is basically, it's really, it's getting down to the heart of the shadow aspects of each card in the major arcana as well. And so there's a light side to each card. There's a dark side to each card. And if you want to know more about the dark side, the shadowy side of it, the tunnels of Set will basically enlighten you to all of that stuff. And so this is interesting. He's showing Sophia, or the Whore of Babylon, the Scarlet Woman, riding the Demiurge, right? This card is a really, really, really big deal to Thelemites, And so I've gone to different OTO lodges and bookshops and stuff, and I've seen shrines basically based around this imagery, of Sophia and the Demiurge, basically, or this card. A lot of times they, will have a printed version or a bigger version of Crowley versions of that card. But the glyph, you can see, it looks like a little, creature. It looks like a cat or something like that with its tail. And then at the end of its tail, it has the Hebrew letter, which means serpent, because that corresponds with this card in so many different ways. Symbolically, serpents, felines, and dragons are all, like, there's so much overlapping stuff between all three. It's absolutely nuts. So there's a serpentine nature to this card. And then the other card that I have just before this one is the star card. And so you can see, again, the sigil for that tunnel in the lower right-hand corner. And you can see that 7-pointed star, the 7-pointed star that corresponds to this great goddess, which is Typhon, which is the abyss, which is space, and all these other things. So anyways, just wanted to put that out there.
Oof. And I got a couple more things that we can wrap up on.
Nice.
So we have here towards the end where he starts to present these sigils that, again, are very Vodun in nature, voodoo, right? They resemble that, right? And so, and the people who use this system, right, they're called Black Brothers or Black Sisters, and they become these vampires essentially when they're able to transcend this other side. And I've heard different occultists talk about how you have to be ruthless and all this other stuff to be able to walk in these other places, whatever. We have here one thing that stood out to me in the introduction of the second part of the book, which is mostly on how to invoke these deities. It's a sort of grimoire, and their attributes and all these different things. Is the tree of life. This book concerns itself more, especially with the back or reverse side of the tree, which we talked about. And I don't know if it was me or not, but there's not really a lot of material on this. I don't know about you, Mario, but there's not. Is it me that I'm not looking, or is there really not that much material?
I haven't really looked too deeply either, to be honest. But, Kenneth Grant wrote a lot of stuff. And so his Typhonian trilogy is made up of 9 books. Oof. So
are we going to do 9 episodes, bro?
So I would imagine he gets into it there. But yeah, I know that side of the book went by kind of quickly. I thought there would be more going on.
Yeah, no. So we have here the actual method of magical evocation has not been given explicitly because of the obvious dangers involved, and because its abuse either through accident or design is only too likely to occur. The proper technique will, however, be evident to those who have read my Typhonian trilogy. What a great plug, right? It's like, those that know, if you know, you know, you got to buy all my books and read them. So it will consequently also be plain to such readers that the use of, and this is weird, such readers that the use of a crystal is not advisable. For in the event of such use, the Cliffoth would inevitably be constrained to manifest on the hither side of the tree, and the imbalance thus generated by the vacuum created on the other side of the tree could cause havoc in the subjective universe of the scryer. So this makes me think that maybe perhaps, right, the aethers that John Dee and Edward Kelly were tapping into was another version of this, because who was the one to present Choronzon in that idea? It was John Dee and Edward Kelly. They were the first ones to talk about Choronzon, right? The dweller of the abyss. And again, right, Crowley took that system. Parsons used that system. So I think it's a sort of technology, bro. And if you want to believe the cosmology of the Enochian language, it came through divine intervention, through speaking with these entities on the other side that supposedly revealed the system to John Dee and Edward Kelly.
Right.
So I just found that interesting. That I got to be careful. It's the subjective universe of the scry, which kind of is what happened to John Dee and Edward Kelly. If you follow their whole story, it is because the operator must launch him or herself, they, them, whoever, into the tunnels themselves, that the dangers of mishap are ever present. The greatest being that he will be overwhelmed by the conditions existing in the alien dimension he has entered. The least being that he may lose himself in the intricate maze of tunnels, cells, and tubes with which the other side of the tree is honeycombed. So that's where I got that. The description of the back side of the tree was honeycombed. And again, some of I'm going to just go through these really quickly, but essentially a lot of these different deities, they give you the power of divination. Let's see here. So the adept is able to just transcend the merely conceptual transmission of imagery. He is thus able to maneuver specific atavisms at a level deeper than those he could penetrate as a magus. This is because the sounds of the outer spaces, like the music of the spheres, may be apprehended only when the ape-like chattering of the magician's vehicle has been subdued by contact with the transcosmic forces that sweep through his tunnel. So again, very wordy, but a lot of these different deities, they give you different powers, I guess. I don't know. I mean, if you practice this sort of stuff, drop a comment, let us know if this is true or not. I don't know. So clairvoyance, divination was one of the ones I saw. The 14th, the magical power corresponding to this kala is traditionally the ability to distill love filters, I guess. So again, I don't know if you have anything else, but I didn't really dive too deep down into this aspect of it.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to mention the whole disease thing is fascinating, basically.
Yeah, so I understood that wrong, because the reason I asked you that was because the diseases typical of the 14th kala, which is here, are syphilis, gonorrhea, and nymphomaniac. And I asked you, I said, is this something that happens to the magus or the adept or whoever it is? Or is it the law of correspondence where maybe you, I don't know, get syphilis on the astral realm?
I think it's more of a correspondence where, if you're talking about an animal, right, what animal corresponds with what planet, right? If you're talking about flowers and trees, what's up, Cheney?
What's up, Cheney?
And all that kind of stuff, what do these things associate with? How do you work with them? It gives you, what's the map, I guess. And so when you're dealing with the tunnels of Set, I thought it was really intriguing that they actually have a disease or an illness or whatever corresponding with each tunnel, and that they correspond with the tunnel based on what that disease does, essentially. And so again, it goes back to this putrefaction thing, it goes back to this decaying thing, it goes back to this dissolution thing, so I thought about Baphomet a few times, Baphomet having solve coagula, dissolve and coagulate, to break things down and bring things back together. the tunnels of Set is all about that dissolution. It's all about the things kind of like breaking down or whatever, including time itself, including reality, including your ego and all these other types of things. So, yeah, so I thought that was cool. But one thing I do want to get to just briefly, I'll read like 2 or 3 sentences here. And maybe this can be a teaser or a preview for another show.
Don't
or something
tease
like
me,
that.
Mario. Don't do that. You silly goose.
So the other book, as I mentioned earlier, that I read is called Rites of the Mummy by
Fucking
Jeffrey
cheater.
Evans and Peter Levenda. I had to. They didn't have Kenneth Grant at that bookstore.
You
but the
didn't
guy
tell me that you were going to be doing extracurricular activities during this research.
Dude,
So
I read 2 books for you, man. Two books for this conversation. And it was, dude, so worth my while. Honestly, I'm so glad you prompted this. I've gotten a lot out of this material, and as you've already been saying,
I didn't though. You did.
More.
I was like, let's do Grant. And you're
That's
like, let's
true.
do the tunnels of South. All right, cool, whatever.
Yeah. That's true. But a weird, interesting weave having to do with Florida came up multiple times throughout all this stuff because Kenneth Grant lived in Florida. Peter Levenda
Really?
lives in Florida. Yeah, one of the
What?
OTO groups that was doing a lot of heavy Lovecraftian typhonian work was in Florida. And I'm like, whoa, this is fascinating. Obviously, your work with Florida and Longo and all that kind of stuff. I got all excited. I was like, dudes, they need to know about some of this stuff. And
Fucking nips were just like fucking protruding through your.
it, dude. So in it, Levenda talks about the fact that Florida is an optimal place to summon Cthulhu, of all places.
Yo,
right?
where's Gabe? Is Gabe here?
I know. Yeah, exactly. Right. Totally. And so anyway, so in it, I just highlighted this little section about it, but the old ones, okay, other indications that Florida is geographically and topographically ideal for the evocation of such entities as Cthulhu and Dagon are the fact that geologically the region is composed of primarily coral, which is the melded bones of dead colonies of the type of primal sea creatures that represent the old ones, astrally. And the fact that its shores are lined with mangrove hammocks, swampy areas actually created by the presence of the old ones. Or no, created by the presence of the mangrove, a type of tree that is especially representative of the old ones.
Whoa.
There is the Everglades, a vast sea of grass serving as a filter system to the inland waters of North America as they flow into the sea, as well as serving as home to the alligator, a descendant of that ancient terror of animals, the dinosaur. And then he kind of goes on.
Shout out to Barry the Gator. So
Nice.
You know who
So
Barry
anyways,
is,
no, I don't know Barry the
bro? I have a pet gator. His name is Barry.
Oh, shit, really?
Yeah, for real. I'm serious.
He's just in the neighborhood or what?
No. So he's in. We bought a property and there was a little pond in it, and he's like 3 years old. And he likes to eat pizza and stuff. So he's like,
Nice.
yeah, bro. He'll come up to you and he'll like let you pet him. It's crazy. I mean, obviously, don't do that. That's not medical advice or whatever it is. Don't pet wild animals. But Barry's a special case. He's my familiar, I guess. Yeah, I have a pet gator. I'm being 100% serious about that. I've posted him on Instagram for those that are interested in.
Right
seeing
on. Nice, dude. That's awesome. So anyways, there's a Florida sort of thread that can be pulled at here with all of this stuff, just so that you're aware.
All right. Yeah, no, definitely. And I've linked the Enochian Keys with Florida. I've done, there is a connection to John Dee and Florida. He met with Christopher Columbus, and he was also in charge of coming up with the longitude and latitude system. So there are some connections. The Standard Oil connection as well. Harkness is a very prevalent name in John Dee esotericism, and they were they were part of the family that helped found Florida. So there's no occult. There's definitely a cult connection there. And the Fountain of Youth, is that like the elixir of life? Was Juan Ponce de Leon a homunculus? He was only 5 feet tall. So again, there's a whole bunch of different connections, but definitely. And let's see here. I had one more thing that I wanted to plug. Do you have anything else you want to get into before we skedaddle?
You know what, man? I think that'll do it. So I think we covered most everything I wanted to get around to. Yeah, so
that'll do, little homunculus. That'll do. All right, I'm going to bring up one more thing, which I'm pretty excited about. I don't know if I'm able to show this yet or not, but I'm going to. Let's see here. But next month, let me find the picture. I am going to be, speaking of Florida, I am on the cover of the Florida edition of Paranormality magazine. Let me pull up my screen.
Nice.
So yeah, never thought I'd have my ugly ass face on a magazine, but hey, we did it, boys. We did it. We're here. We're large and in charge. But check this out. Not my best picture, but Paranormality, Florida's homuncologist.
Hell yeah, man.
This comes out next month,
dude.
Again, Florida edition, and you're able to pick up a copy when it goes live, and you can use promo code TJOJP to get your copy. But yeah, I'm on the cover of a magazine. There's an exclusive interview in there as well by Paranormality, right? Chaz the Dead, and he said some really nice things in there about me, which again, I really appreciate it. But yeah, this is how far we've come, man. Being on the covers of magazines and talking about homunculus and all this craziness. Yeah, never thought 3 years would, 3 years ago when I started, 4 years, something like that, I would be talking about the things I'm talking about and being on a magazine cover. So yeah, stay on the lookout for that. Comes out June 1st, and you can use promo code TJOJP to get your copy. So yeah,
that's
dude,
awesome, man. You deserve it. Seriously, your output is incredible, and I just love the fact that you can hang with lots of different types of people with different types of information, and so that is a skill that you've developed. And anyways, all the credit goes to you, man. You do
Thanks,
great
bro.
stuff. Yeah.
I learn a lot from channels like yours, though. I can't take all the credit. Like I do learn a lot from other people's content, and I think that's what I mentioned at the beginning. When we both dive into this subject, we're able to see it from different lenses, right? Because I've read the things I've read, you've read the things you've read, and we're able to kind of morph things into stay on topic, but look at it from a different perspective, which I think perspective is key. The perception is key in how you perceive things. So absolutely, I appreciate that, man. And I appreciate you, bro, for being here with me and doing this with me. Who knows what the future has in store. I might not do so many lives. I'm going to be going into a bit of a hibernation because I am working on a book. So I want to pump that out as soon as possible. So yeah, I'm still going to get episodes, but I might not be doing lives. This would be one of my last lives, and that way I can release some of this mental bandwidth to dedicate to the book 100%. So yeah, dude, do you want to plug any of your stuff? Symbolic Studies, tarot readings, website, all that stuff?
You got it. If people are interested in tarot readings, they can reach out and schedule something. And I also do study sessions, is what I call them. Basically, they're consultations, but people have hit me up for all sorts of things, which has been really fun. So as an example, next week I have a meeting with a woman, and she bought a Freemasonic tracing board at a thrift store. And she's like, hey, I love the artwork, but I have no idea what any of it means. Can you just sit with me for an hour and just talk about some of the symbolism? And I'm like, dude, I'm your guy for sure. So
Awesome.
Yeah, if people like my stuff, once again, symbolicstudies.com, or you can support via Patreon, patreon.com/symbolicstudies. Of course, I would appreciate any subscribers or likes or comments or anything like that. But yeah, man, this was a good time, dude. Really appreciate, you just kind of pulling this all together.
Yeah, dude, I appreciate you. Yeah, everybody on my side, because we are live broadcasting this on Mario's side and mine. Make sure to subscribe to his channel. You can check me out, tjojp.com, patreon.com/the1on1 podcast. I appreciate everyone who supports the show on there. And yeah, dude, this was fun. We'll plan another weird topic next. Let me brainstorm. Let me get through these next couple of months, because I know you and I had gone together a little bit ago. It had been a little bit ago. So
yeah.
I think the last episode we did was the Chariot card, wasn't it? Which was a while ago.
It was either the Chariot card. We did a Christmas thing, actually.
Oh,
with Donut.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, with Donut and Waters Above.
Yep.
Yeah. Check that out. That's actually, I think, my highest viewed episode on YouTube. So yeah, definitely, dude. Appreciate everyone who showed up tonight. We had a good crowd tonight, and I'll catch you guys on the other side. And do the wave, Mario. Do the wave. Do the wave. There we go.
See you guys.
Bye-bye, everybody. Bye.